The attic smells like old flour and something that died up here a while back, and Eldrick has chosen not to investigate what. He moves the lantern along the low beam, ducking his head out of habit, even though he's cleared this ceiling 1,000 times. The flour sack is in the corner where he left it. He grabs it with both hands, tucks it under his arm, and starts back toward the ladder. That's when he hears the door downstairs. 4 sets of boots on his floorboards, heavy, slow, unhurried. The kind of steps that belong to people who have nowhere urgent to be and know it. Eldrick stops on the second rung of the ladder and listens for a moment. He recognizes that sound. He's been recognizing it in his sleep for the past 2 months. Metal-plated soles, Imperial Standard issue, the particular rhythm of men who get paid to collect things. He comes down anyway. What else is he going to do? Stay in the attic forever? There are 4 of them. Yes, one is already sitting at his best table, which isn't saying much since all 5 tables are identical and none of them are good. He's a broad man with a red beard trimmed close, and he has the manner of someone who does this professionally and holds no personal grudges. Eldrick, the man says, not a question. He has a small ledger open in front of him. We've been patient. The flour sack is still under Eldrick's arm. He's thinking about the roll. He promised himself he'd get a batch in tonight so they'd be ready by morning. And now he's standing here doing this instead. I know, Eldrick says. Emperor's treasury doesn't extend patience indefinitely. I know that too. The figure is 50 gold. The man taps the ledger. Not threatening, just informative. We gave you 2 extra weeks. That was a courtesy. Eldrick looks at the ledger. He looks at the flour sack. He does a very brief and very depressing calculation in his head. I don't have 50 gold, he says. The man with the red beard closes the ledger. He nods once slowly, like a physician confirming a diagnosis. Then he looks at the other 3 men. What happens next is efficient. They are professionals after all. No furniture gets broken. Nobody shouts. It's almost polite in the way that very cold things are polite, precise, and without any unnecessary warmth. The flour sack hits the floor first. Then Eldrick. He's on his back staring up at the ceiling beams he knows by heart. There's flour everywhere. White dust hanging in the lantern light like snow. He thinks that's the flour gone. No rolls tomorrow. He thinks this very clearly and with real disappointment. And then the ceiling starts to swim. And he loses it entirely. 3 days. He doesn't know that yet. The 3 days part. He only knows what he sees. It isn't a dream. Dreams have the texture of dreams. Loose, shifting logic that bends when you push it. This is nothing like that. This is like being placed very carefully in front of something and told to look for a hall, no many halls, one after another, or maybe all at once. He can't resolve the geometry. What he can resolve: people. Hundreds of them, sitting, standing, eating, colors on tables that he doesn't have names for, not because they're impossible colors, but because he has never seen them on food before. Oranges so bright they look painted. Greens like spring, like living things. Browns with a lacquered depths like polished wood. Smells are the worst part. Not bad. The opposite of bad things he has no reference for. Warm and complex and layered in ways that make the inside of his chest do something strange. He tries to look at all of it. He can't. It's too much. It moves too fast. Every time he focuses on one thing, something else catches at the edge of his vision and pulls him sideways. And then everything slows. One thing moves toward him or he moves toward it. The direction is unclear and stops. A bowl, dark broth, the kind of color that means depths. That means something has been coaxed out of bones over a very long time. Fat in small pools on the surface catching the light. Noodles coiled underneath. Yellow pale, a spiral of them. 2 slices of pork arranged on top. The cut edge shows white fat and pink meat in clean alternating layers. And the outer surface has been browned to something that looks like caramel. Looks like half an egg. The yolk, and here's the thing that sticks most. The detail that burns in. The yolk is orange, not yellow. Orange like a late sunset, and it's set but barely. Soft at the center. The kind of texture that takes the exact right amount of time. And not a second more. Green onion and thin rings scattered across the top. Steam rising in a slow column. Eldrick reaches for it. He wakes up in the healer's house on a cot that smells like dried herbs and other people's misfortunes. There's morning light coming through a small window. His ribs announce themselves immediately and with great enthusiasm. Old Bren is sitting in the chair beside him, eating beans from a clay pot with a spoon. Eldrick stares at the pot for a moment. Those are his beans. From his kitchen, Bren has helped himself. You were on the floor for 3 days, Bren says without looking up from the beans. I came in for breakfast Tuesday morning, found you in the flour. Eldrick looks at the ceiling. It's a different ceiling than his kitchen ceiling. Less familiar. He catalogs the differences while his brain finishes restarting. You could have left me, he says. I could have, Bren agrees. But then who would make the beans? He considers the spoonful in front of him. These are worse than usual, by the way. Did something different. I've been busy. So I gathered. Bren finally looks at him. He has the face of a man who has seen a lot of things and stopped being surprised by most of them. But there's something underneath the usual expression right now. Something that might be relief. Move to the far back where it's less embarrassing. Collectors, 4 of them. Bren nods, eats another spoon of beans. What are you going to do? Eldrick is still looking at the ceiling, in his mind with a clarity that has no business being this precise after 3 days unconscious. He can see the bowl, the dark broth, the orange yolk, the curl of steam, his hands. This is the strangest part, his hands know things not in a way he can explain. Just he could go to the kitchen right now this moment on his broken ribs and his unsteady legs, and he thinks he could build that bowl. He doesn't know what it's called. He's never made anything like it, but the sequence of steps is there, waiting in his palms, patient and clear. He sits up. The ribs complain loudly. He ignores them. I need pork bones, he says. Bren stares at him. You just came back from wherever you went for 3 days. Yes, I need pork bones and eggs. And check the attic. There was a flour sack. See if it got wet. He is already thinking about the noodles. Eggs in the dough more than usual. A pinch of something alkaline to change the texture. Make them spring back. He doesn't know how he knows this. He knows it anyway. Bren looks at him for a long moment with the expression of a man who has been friends with a very strange person for a long time, and has learned to just move with it. I'll get the bones, he says. The flour's probably ruined. Get more flour then. On whose money? Eldrick pauses, looks at him. Bren sighs the sigh of someone whose breakfast has just become more expensive. Fine, but I'm eating here the rest of the month. You already eat here every day. For free, for the rest of the month. Eldrick stands up. His legs hold. The ribs are going to be a problem. But he has learned over the years that problems are mostly about what you decide to work around. Deal, he says. Get the bones. Get them today. Get the good ones. Knuckle and spine, not scraps. Bren watches him walk toward the door, limping slightly, already somewhere else in his head. Eldrick, he stops. What happened to you? In those 3 days, Eldrick stands in the doorway with the morning coming in around him. He thinks about the hall, the hundreds of people, the smells he has no names for, the bowl that moved toward him like it was meant to. I saw something, he says. What? He doesn't answer right away. Then I don't know what it's called, but I know how to make it. He walks out into the morning. Behind him, Bryn looks down at the clay pot of beans right. He says to no one. Then he finishes the beans, sets down the spoon, and goes to find a butcher. Eldrick leaves the healer's house 2 days before he's supposed to. The healer tells him his ribs need another week. Eldrick thanks her, pays what he owes, and walks out into the morgue. His left side complains the whole way home. He walks slightly tilted, like a ship taking on water from one direction, and he doesn't slow down. Nell is at the kitchen table when he pushes open the back door. She's sharpening a knife, and she looks up at him with the expression of someone who was not expecting him back this soon, and is not entirely surprised either. You're alive, she says. Mostly. He moves past her toward the hearth. Start the bones. What bones? The ones Bren left. Knuckle and spine. Both pots. Nell watches him pull his apron off the hook. You've been unconscious for 3 days. I know the bones now. She looks at him for another moment the way she always does when she's deciding whether to argue, and then she gets up and gets the bones. The broth is the first problem. He knows what it needs to look like. Dark rich, the kind of color that doesn't come from anything being added to the water. It comes from time, from heat, from something being coaxed slowly out of the marrow and the connective tissue, and everything else the bones have been holding onto. In the vision, it was the color of old wood stained dark, and the surface had small pools of fat that caught the light. He fills both pots, sets them over low fire. How long? Nell asks. Until it's right. She gives him a look. That's not a measurement. I'll know when it's right. She doesn't push further. This is one of the things he values about Nell. She understands that some knowledge is not the kind you can put into words yet, and she waits for the results rather than the explanation. He stirs the pots every hour, tastes the broth with a spoon. At the 2-hour mark it's thin and pale, more like water that used to know a bone. At 4 hours it has color but no weight. At 7 hours he lifts the spoon, and the liquid clings for a moment before falling. Just a moment. Just a half second of resistance. And he tastes it and there is something underneath the surface now. A depth that wasn't there before. He keeps going. At the end of 11 hours, nearly midnight, he dips the spoon in and holds it up. And the broth is dark and it coats the spoon. And when he puts it to his lips, it sticks slightly. The way a good thing always leaves a trace. He tastes it properly. There it is. He sits on the stool and holds the spoon in both hands and stares at the pot for a while. Nell has fallen asleep in the chair by the hearth with a rag over her face to block the firelight. That's the base. Now the rest. The noodles are harder. He's made noodles before, flour and water. Rolled thin, cut into strips. Simple. He makes them every week for the soup. But the noodles in the vision were different. Yellower with a springiness to them. A resistance when you bit through that regular noodles don't have. They held their shape in the broth instead of going soft. He mixes flour and water the way he always does. Rolls a test batch, drops them in hot water. They go limp in 2 minutes. Not right. He thinks about the yellow. Where does yellow come from in dough? Eggs, whole eggs. More than he normally uses. Beaten ends. He strips 3 eggs into a new batch of flour and works the dough. Better texture already. Stiffer. Rolls it. Tests it. Still goes soft too fast. There's something else. He thinks about the baking soda he keeps for the rolls. A pinch of it changes how things rise. Changes the structure. He doesn't know exactly why it would help here, but his hands suggest it, and he's learned tonight to trust his hands. Tiny amount. Into the dough. He works it in and the dough changes under his palms, becomes firmer, slightly more resistant, almost elastic. He rolls it thin, cuts strips, drops them in the boiling water, counts to 40, pulls them out, bites one. They push back against his teeth and then give cleanly, and they hold their shape and they are faintly yellow. There you are, he says quietly to the noodles. Nell's voice comes from under the rag. Did you just talk to the pasta? Go back to sleep. The pork belly, the fattiest cut he has, which he would normally use for the stew. He slices it into a thick block. The vision showed 2 long slices laid across the top of the bowl, and the cut edge revealed white fat and pink meat in alternating layers. Clean and precise, and the outer surface was brown and caramelized. He mixes soy sauce. He has a small bottle, imported, expensive. He uses it sparingly with dark sugar and crushed garlic. Submerges the pork in it and leaves it while he works on other things. 30 minutes later, he takes it out and sears it in a dry pan over high heat. The fat side first. It renders and spits and fills the kitchen with a smell that makes Nell sit up from the chair. What is that? Sit down. What is that smell? Sit down. She sits down, but she's watching now. The pork goes into the broth to finish cooking. Low and slow until the meat yields to gentle pressure. And the soy and sugar have soaked into the layers. He pulls it out, lets it rest, then cuts 2 slices, long, even, the blade going through the chilled block in clean strokes. The cross-section, white fat, pink meat, like a small piece of architecture. The egg is the last thing, and it might be the most important. He knows this without being able to say why. In the vision, the egg was what he looked at longest, that orange yolk set but not quite solid. Somewhere between liquid and firm in a way that takes very precise timing. Too little heat and it's raw at the center. Too much and it goes chalky yellow and hard. The margin is not large. He has a small sand glass that he uses for the bread. It runs for 8 minutes. He needs less than that. He fills a small pot of water and brings it to a full boil. Lowers 2 eggs and carefully flips the sand glass and watches the sand fall. Pulls the eggs at 6.5 minutes. Plunges them straight into the bucket of cold water he prepared. Waits 2 minutes, peels one very carefully, cuts it in half. The white is set, the yolk is orange, not yellow-orange, and it holds its shape for 1 second before sagging softly inward at the cut edge, almost liquid at the very center. The color of a late sunset through clouds. He does not say anything, he just looks at it. Nell is behind him now, no longer pretending to sleep. She looks at the yolk over his shoulder. How did you know to do that? She says, quiet, like it's not entirely a question. I don't know. He assembles the bowl. Broth goes in first. Ladled from the pot. Hot, dark, steaming. Noodles in a spiral in the center. Pulled from the water at exactly 40 seconds and dropped in immediately. 2 slices of pork arranged over the noodles. The cross-section facing up. Half an egg on the side. The cut face up so the yolk shows. Green onion in thin rings across the top. He has some growing in a pot on the window ledge. Dry at the tips but still alive. The broth hits first. Deep, heavy with fat and bone, something at the back of the throat that's almost sweet. Then the noodle which gives and springs back, and the soy dark pork that's tender all the way through and has that caramelized crust that adds a different texture entirely. The yolk breaks open when he presses the spoon to it and bleeds into the broth, and the whole thing gets richer. He sets the spoon down, he stands over the empty bowl, and he doesn't move for almost a full minute. Then he makes another one. He doesn't say anything. He just puts the bowl in front of Nell, who has been watching him from the corner of the kitchen with her arms crossed, the way she watches when she's trying to figure something out. She sits down, she eats, she doesn't speak while she eats. When the bowl is empty, she puts the spoon down and looks up at him. Did you make this up yourself? Eldrick thinks about it. About the hall of the people, the bowl that came toward him out of all the chaos. Someone showed me, he says. Nell looks at him the way she sometimes does. Measuring, recalibrating. Then she looks back at the empty bowl. I don't care, she says. We're selling this. The next morning, Eldrick wipes the chalkboard clean. The menu has been the same for 7 years. Braised beef, mashed potato, rolls, soup, pickled radish, beans, and tomato tea. He's written it so many times, the chalk barely leaves a mark anymore. The grooves in the board remember the words on their own. He wipes it all away. Writes one thing. Ramen, 8 coppers. Nell watches from the kitchen doorway. If nobody orders it, she says, we have nothing to sell. Someone will order it. What if they don't? Eldrick puts the chalk down. Then I'll feed it to Bren and he'll tell everyone on the street and they'll order it. Nell considers this. That's your business plan. That's my business plan. She goes back into the kitchen. After a moment, he hears her starting the broth, the sound of water filling the big pot, then the thud of bones going in. She doesn't say whether she thinks it'll work, she just starts cooking. That's the other thing he values about Nell. Old Bran arrives that evening at his usual time, in his usual way, opens the door without knocking, sits at the second table and then stops. He looks at the chalkboard. Where's the beef? He says. Gone. The soup. Gone. The red. All gone, Bren. Bren stares at the board. He stares at it for a long time, with the expression of a man whose comfortable routine has just been altered without consultation. What's ramen? Eldrick puts a bowl in front of him. Bren looks at the bowl. He looks at the broth, the noodles, the pork, the egg. He looks at the steam. He picks up his spoon. He eats. Eldrick wipes down the counter and doesn't watch him, or appears not to watch him, which is different. From the corner of his eye, he sees Bren stop chewing at some point, and just sit very still with the spoon halfway to his mouth. Then he keeps eating, then he slows down. Not because he wants to stop, but the opposite reason making it last. The bowl is empty in 3 minutes. Bren sits with the empty bowl in front of him. He looks at the table. He looks at his hands, then he pushes back from the table, stands up and walks to the front door. Eldrick watches him go. Bren opens the door and steps halfway out into the evening street. Lloyd? He shouts to no one in particular and everyone in range. Go to Eldrick's right now, not tomorrow, now I'm telling you. Eldrick hears someone on the street say, what? Just go, Bren says. The next 2 days happen fast. Word moves the way it always moves in a city, through the people who have nowhere to be and everything to say. Bren tells 3 men at the well. Those men each tell someone else. By the second morning, there are people in the dining room who have never set foot in his establishment before, who heard about the new thing from someone who heard about it from someone, and who come through the door with the specific expression of people who are here to see if the story is true. They order the ramen, they eat it, their expression changes, the queue forms on the second day. It starts inside, fills the 5 tables, then goes to the door, then goes out the door and down the front wall. By evening, it stretches 20 meters into the street. People who finish their first bowl look at the person across the table from them and say nothing, which communicates everything. Then they order another's. The kitchen runs constantly, breath-going noodles being cut and cooked to order, pork being sliced, eggs timed to the second. Nell and Eldrick work without speaking much. They've worked together long enough that the kitchen has its own language, a language of positions and timing and the sound of particular pots, and what it means when they make certain sounds. Bran asked for thirds, Nell says during a brief gap. Charge him. He says you owe him. Tell him the first one was the payment. A pause from Nell's side of the kitchen. He says that's reasonable. The recipe is secret from the first day. Eldrick bolts the kitchen door during prep. When the broth is started, when the pork is in the marinade, when the noodles are being mixed, the bolt goes across and it stays across. Nell knows every step. No one else enters. 3 times in the first week, someone appears at the back with a friendly face and a reason to come inside. A trader who wants to discuss flour prices. A woman whose cousin apparently used to live on this street. A man who claims to be from the city health inspection, which is almost certainly not a real position. Nell deals with all 3 of them. The conversations are brief. The men leave quickly. Nell has a face she makes, entirely neutral without hostility, but with something behind the neutrality that suggests continuing to stand in this doorway would be an error, and it works very well. On the third day, the four men come back. Redbeard and his three colleagues. They appear at the end of the queue on the street, and Eldrick sees them from inside before they see him. He watches them look at the line, then look at each other. Redbeard says something, one of the others responds. They walk to the front, not pushing past, just walking to the front, because they are men who are accustomed to walking to the front of things. The dining room is full. Every table taken, a family at one, workers at two others, a merchant and his apprentice at the fourth, two old men playing dice and eating at the fifth. There is nowhere to sit. For a moment, everyone in the room registers what these four men are. The metal-plated boots, the way they stand, the silence that forms around them like a little weather system. Then, without being asked, the merchant at the fourth table picks up his bowl, nods to his apprentice, and they move to stand near the wall. Please, the merchant says, gesturing at the empty table. Redbeard looks at the vacated table, looks around the room. His eyes find Eldrick behind the counter. Eldrick looks back at him. Neither of them speaks. There's a period of approximately 4 seconds, in which a great deal is communicated through eye contact alone. Then Nell comes through from the kitchen with 4 bowls arranged on a wide tray, and she sets them on the table in front of the 4 men with the efficient, impersonal grace of someone who treats all customers exactly the same. Because treating them all the same is the most powerful thing she can do right now. The 4 men sit, they look at the bowls, they eat. The dining room, which had gone very quiet, gradually begins to come back to its normal volume. Not because anyone decided it should, just because the sound of people eating soup is fundamentally a peaceful sound, and it asserts itself. Eldrick wipes the counter. He doesn't watch them. He listens. For a long time, there is nothing but the sound of spoons and the occasional sound of someone drawing noodles up. Then near the end of the bowl, he hears Redbeard set his spoon down. Not aggressively, just finished. Another week, Redbeard says. Eldrick nods. The 4 men get up, arrange their coats, and leave in the same quiet professional manner in which they arrived. One of them, not Redbeard, one of the others, glances back at the counter as he goes through the door. Not threatening. Something else. Something that might be, in a very understated way, impressed. The door closes. Nell appears in the kitchen doorway. She looks at Eldrick. He looks at her. She goes back into the kitchen without saying anything. But he hears from behind the closed door a single long breath, the kind that a person releases when something that was coiled very tight is, briefly, allowed to relax. Eldrick picks up a rag and wipes the counter again. It doesn't need wiping, he does it anyway. Outside, the queue is still 20 meters long. The dining room cannot keep up with itself. 5 tables, 20 seats at maximum if people are friendly about it. The queue outside on a good evening is 40 people long, and on a bad evening it's the same 40 people but angrier about it. Nell runs the kitchen like a general running a siege, precise, humorless, always 3 steps ahead. But the floor between the kitchen and the tables is nobody's territory, and it shows. Bowls sit too long at the pass, the wrong orders go to the wrong tables. Bran once received a bowl that was clearly meant for someone else, ate half of it, and then pointed this out, which helped no one. Eldrick is at the counter one evening trying to be in 4 places at once, which is not working. When a girl walks through the front door and stops in the middle of the room and looks around with the focused expression of someone conducting an assessment, she's young, early 20s, maybe dark hair pulled back. She has the particular quality of stillness in motion that belongs to people who think faster than they move. You need a waitress, she says. Eldrick looks at her from behind the counter. Do I? Yes. Your pacing is wrong. The tables on the left wait longer than the tables on the right, because you favor the right side when you come out of the kitchen. Also, someone at table 3 has been trying to get your attention for 6 minutes. She pauses. I counted. Eldrick looks at table 3. The man there raises his hand somewhat desperately. Experience. Eldrick says. No, the girl says. But I walk fast. He looks at her for a moment. What's your name? Tess. Start tomorrow. Tess does in fact walk fast. She also talks fast, thinks fast, and processes information at a rate that makes Eldrick feel slightly slow by comparison. Which is not something he's accustomed to feeling. By the end of her first day, she knows the names of 12 regulars, which tables they prefer, who takes extra pepper, who wants the broth on the lighter side, and who is currently not speaking to whom and should therefore not be seated adjacent. She deploys this knowledge without announcing it. She simply arranges things so that the right people end up in the right places, and it looks effortless, which means it cost her a great deal of attention that she spent invisibly. On her second day, she starts making recommendations. You two are both from the North Quarter, she tells a pair of strangers, seating them together. You'll find something to talk about. They look at each other with mild suspicion, and then, 20 minutes later, are deep in conversation about the northern water supply situation. Tess passes their table without looking at them, carrying 3 bowls, already thinking about something else. Eldrick watches this from the kitchen doorway. How does she do that, he says. Nell doesn't look up from the broths. She pays attention to people. You pay attention to food between you. You have one complete skill set. 8 days after Tess starts, she comes into the kitchen with the expression she gets when she has something to say that she has already thought through completely, and is simply waiting for the right moment to deliver. Eldrick is cutting pork. What? We have no children. He stops cutting. What? Children? Small people. Under the age of 12, she lands against the doorframe. Families come in. The father orders ramen. The mother orders ramen. The children look at the bowl, smell the broth, decide it's a grown-up food and eat nothing. Or the parents don't bring them at all because there's nothing for them. She pauses. I've been watching for 8 days. The families with children spend less than families without, and they leave faster and they don't come back as often. Eldrick looks at her. You've worked here for 8 days. That's why I noticed. You've both been here for years. You stopped seeing it. Nell makes a small sound from the other side of the kitchen that might be agreement, which is unusual. Eldrick puts the knife down. He thinks about it. Children. What children eat. What makes children want food versus what makes them turn away from it. Raymond is dark and complex and hot and faintly funky from the bones. It is. Tess is correct. An adult food. Not because children can't eat it, but because it doesn't meet them where they are. I'll think about it, he says. Tess nods once and goes back to the floor. That night Eldrick doesn't sleep well. He lies on his back and thinks about sweet things. About what children want from food. It's simpler than what adults want. Less about depth and more about the immediate, the bright, the warm, the fun. He thinks about the takoyaki shapes in the vision which he has now dismissed twice as not practical. But then again he dismissed the noodles as impossible before he made them. He falls asleep thinking about batter and heat and small things you can hold in your hands. What he sees is this iron molds hinged, each one shaped like a fish, not a real fish, a simple fish, the kind a child would draw, round body, small tail, and eyes stamped into the surface. They sit over heat on a long-handled bracket. Batter gets poured in thin, egg-pale batter, just enough to fill the lower half. Then a dark filling, thick and sweet, spooned into the center. Then more batter over the top. The mold closes, held shut 1 minute, maybe less, then flipped another minute, then opened. A golden fish. The outside has the texture of something fried, a slight resistance and then a crunch. The inside is soft, almost cake-like. The filling, dark, sweet, warm, is thick enough that it doesn't run. It just sits there in the center, dense and rich. A child takes one in both hands and looks at it. Really looks the way children look at something they've never seen before that immediately makes sense to them, then eats it from the tail. Eldrick sits up. It is 4 in the morning. He knows this because the city is at its quietest, that specific quality of silence that belongs only to the hour before the bakers start. He gets dressed and walks to the blacksmith. Torin is not awake at 4 in the morning. Torin wakes at 5, which he considers an indulgence, but a necessary one, because a man who doesn't sleep long enough makes bad welds. He has held this view for 30 years, and he is not interested in revising it. So when the knocking starts at his door at 4 in the morning, he lies still for a full minute, hoping it stops. It doesn't stop. He opens the door. Eldrick is standing there with a lantern, looking like a man who has been awake all night, and doesn't consider this unusual. Torin stares at him. What? I need a mold. I'm asleep. You opened the door. I was hoping you were someone else. Torin leans against the doorframe and crosses his arms. He is a large man, Torin, built low and wide like something that grew sideways instead of up, with forearms that belong on someone a foot taller. He has the particular economy of expression of someone who speaks rarely, because he finds most conversations inefficient. What kind of mold? Eldrick describes it. 2 halves hinged on one side. Fish shape, the simple kind. A child's fish body and tail and a round eye palm-sized. A handle on the back of each half so it can be held over heat. A small gap around the edge so steam can escape without the mold popping open. 5 of them. Torin listens with his arms still crossed. When Eldrick finishes, there is a pause. Fish, Torin says. Fish, for food, for baking food inside. Baking food shaped like a fish. Yes, another pause. Why a fish? Eldrick considers the question. The honest answer is that he saw it in a vision while unconscious with cracked ribs, which is not an answer he gives people anymore because of how they respond to it. Children like fish shapes, he says. Torin looks at him for a long moment, with an expression that communicates a complex mixture of things. Professional curiosity, personal skepticism, and the particular resignation of a craftsman who has been asked to make stranger things by people with worse reasons. 3 days, he says. Bring food. 3 days later, the molds are ready. Torn has made 5 of them, and they are characteristically better than described. The hinges are smooth and tight. The fish shape has a slightly raised scale pattern pressed into the interface that will transfer to the food, and the handles are long enough to keep your hands well away from the heat. He has also made, unrequested, a small iron bracket that holds all 5 molds over the same fire simultaneously. I didn't ask for the bracket, Eldrick says. You would help, Torin says. He's right, Eldrick pays him, adds 2 bowls of ramen from the pot he carried over and takes the molds back to the kitchen. The batter takes 3 tries. He knows it needs to be thinner than bread dough, thin enough to pour, thick enough to hold a shape. He tries his usual roll batter first, too thick. It fills the mold unevenly, and the outside overcooks before the center sets. He thins it with milk better, thins it further and adds an extra egg. The batter runs off the spoon in a slow ribbon. He fills the mold halfway, adds the bean paste, closes it, holds it over the heat. 1 minute, opens it. The fish is pale and soft and collapses slightly when he touches it. Not long enough. Second try, 90 seconds each side. Better outside, center still slightly raw. He adjusts, pours a slightly thicker batter, holds it longer on the first side before flipping. The bottom needs to set first, form the structure that the whole thing rests on. 2 minutes on the first side, 90 seconds on the second, opens the mold. The fish slides out. It is golden, genuinely golden, the color of well-done butter, with a faint scale pattern pressed into the surface from the mold. He taps it and it sounds slightly hollow and crisp. He breaks it open. The outside is a thin, crunchy shell. The inside is soft, faintly sweet from the egg and milk. In the center, the bean paste sits dark and thick and hot, and when he presses it with his thumb, it doesn't run. It holds, it yields. He eats it, the crunch first, then the soft give of the cake, then the dense, sweet filling. 3 textures in one small thing, warm all the way through. He makes the full batch, adjusts the bean paste. It needs a pinch of salt in addition to the sugar, which sounds wrong but makes the sweetness cleaner. The 4th batch is right. He puts one on a plate and brings it to the floor. Tess is clearing table 2. He puts the plate in front of her. She looks at it. A golden fish. She picks it up, looks at it the way you look at something new, then bites off the tail. Her eyes close. A moment. You said this was for the children, she says. It is. How many are you making? Enough for the children. Tess puts the rest of the fish in her mouth. Make more, she says with her mouth full, which she would normally consider unprofessional. Make significantly more. The next morning, the taiyaki go on the board beside the ramen, 3 copper each. The sign Tess writes below them says, golden fish, sweet for small people and their parents. Eldrick looks at this last edition. I said it was for children and their parents, Tess says. Trust me, the first child to order is maybe 7 years old. A girl in a yellow coat who has been staring at the word fish on the board for 2 full minutes, while her father eats his ramen. He finally gives her the coins and she brings them to the counter herself very seriously and places them down. Eldrick puts the taiyaki on a small piece of cloth in front of her. She picks it up in both hands. She looks at it. The golden color, the scale pattern, the slightly rounded body. She turns it over. She seems to be deciding something. Then she bites the tail off. The crunch is audible. She freezes. Then she takes another bite. Then she turns and runs back to her father and says something with great urgency, gesturing at the counter. Her father looks up from his ramen. He looks at the counter. He looks at Eldrick. He holds up 2 fingers. Within the hour, there are children in the queue, not with their parents, ahead of their parents, pulling their parents by the sleeve. Each one has coins already in their fist, gathered from somewhere, the way children gather coins when something has become sufficiently important. Bren watches this from his usual table, halfway through his second bowl, with the thoughtful expression of a man watching something he doesn't fully understand, but is glad to be present for. No, Bren points at the queue. You made something the adults buy for the children, and the children drag the adults here to buy it. You understand what that is, Eldrick waits. It's a machine, Bren says. A machine where one end makes the other end turn, and that end makes the first end turn, and it never stops. He looks satisfied with this explanation. You built a machine that never stops. Eldrick looks at the queue, at the children with their coins, at the fathers who came for ramen and are now also buying golden fish. I just wanted the children to have something to eat, he says. Bren nods seriously. Yes, he says. That's usually how the best machines get built. Somebody just wanted a thing. And then he gestures vaguely at the room. And then the ramen and the taiyaki together do something that neither of them does alone. Ramen brings people in. Taiyaki keeps them longer, because after the bowl there's the question of whether to get a fish for the child, and the answer is always yes. And getting the fish takes another few minutes, and those few minutes are enough for someone to decide on a second bowl. Tess identifies this within 3 days, and quietly rearranges the serving order, so the taiyaki comes slightly after the ramen, rather than alongside, giving the fish maximum impact at the exact moment when the adult is happiest and most generous. Eldrick watches her do this. You move the timings. I nudge the timing, she says. There's a difference. What's the difference? Moving is obvious. Nudging is invisible. She straightens a bowl on the tray. Invisible works better. He doesn't argue with this. The evidence is on the floor every evening. In the form of children at the low tables, Tess installed along the east wall, small, squat, the right height for a 7-year-old, eating their fish with both hands while their parents sit at the regular tables and order another bowl they hadn't planned on. Bren calls it the machine. It runs constantly. It does not break down. The debt to the Imperial Treasury closes on a Tuesday. Redbeard comes for the last time with the same 3 men in the same ledger. Eldrick puts the coins on the counter. Counted. Exact. The correct total without a word spoken. Redbeard counts them, which is his job, and then makes a mark in the ledger that Eldrick cannot read from this angle, but can infer the meaning of. Settled. Redbeard says he closes the ledger. He doesn't move immediately. There's a pause that doesn't quite belong to the transaction. Something else in it. His eyes go to the dining room, the cue, the chalkboard, then back to Eldrick. You're a good cook, he says. The way he says it is completely neutral. Not a compliment, not a judgment, a simple statement of observed fact. The same tone he would use to say the weather is cold or the road to the east is 5 miles. Thank you, Eldrick says in the same tone. Redbeard picks up the ledger and goes. At the door he nearly collides with Bren coming in, and there's a brief shuffle, and then they're past each other and Bren is at his table and the collectors are gone. Bren watches the door close. Was that them? Last time, Eldrick says. Bren sits down, pulls his bowl toward him, and picks up the spoon with the manner of a man receiving good news he already expected. Good, he says, and eats. Holt arrives the following week. He's the landlord of the building, has been for 11 years, which Eldrick sometimes forgets and sometimes remembers depending on how recently Holt has done something irritating. He's a round man, soft in the middle, with the particular quality of cheerfulness that belongs to people who are currently getting what they want and tend to lose it when they aren't. He comes for the month's rent and stops in the doorway when he sees the queue. He stands there for a moment. Eldrick can see him from behind the counter, watching Holt's face do something, some internal accounting, some reassessment of a situation he thought he understood and is now recalculating. The queue is 14 people long inside and another dozen outside. It's 11 in the morning. Holt comes to the counter. He collects the rent. He counts it, which Eldrick expected, and pockets it, and then he stays standing there with the look of someone about to say something they've rehearsed. The thing is, he begins, how much? Eldrick says. Holt blinks. I haven't said the 4 spaces on this street. The empty ones. How much? Holt recovers quickly. He's a landlord. He's accustomed to negotiation. He names a figure. It's high. It's the figure he names when he doesn't expect to get it, but wants room to come down gracefully. Eldrick is quiet for one moment. Then he names a different figure. Lower. About 2/3 of Holt's number. Holt makes a face. He draws breath to negotiate. Tess passes behind Eldrick with a full tray, not looking at either of them. Those 4 spaces have been empty for 14 months, Holt, she says to the middle distance. You repainted the front of one of them last spring, and nobody came anyway. She rounds the corner to table 3. Just a thought. Holt looks after her. He looks at Eldrick. He looks at his own hands. Fine, he says. He doesn't sound unhappy. Exactly. He sounds like a man who has negotiated against himself, which is a strange feeling, and he's not sure yet if he minds. Same terms as this building. Same terms, Eldrick says. They shake hands, Holt leaves. Tess comes back with the empty tray and doesn't say anything, which is a form of saying everything. The 4 spaces are on the same street, 2 doors down, then a gap, then 2 more. They're not large. They're not in good condition. One of them has a bird's nest in the chimney, and another has a door that doesn't quite close all the way and lets in a draft. Eldrick walks through all 4 of them in an afternoon with Tess, who takes notes on a piece of paper, and Nell, who presses on walls to see which ones sound worryingly hollow. 1 kitchen. Nell says central serves everything. The ramen needs its own heat. Eldrick says, I said 1 kitchen, I didn't say 1 fire. Tess is in the middle of the largest space, turning slowly, looking at the ceiling. And then the floor, and then the street. Through the window people come in from the street, she says, thinking aloud. Multiple counters. You pick what you want, you take a number, no a token, you take a token. and they bring it to your table. When it's ready, she stops turning everything open so you can see it being made. Eldrick looks at her. Why can they see it being made? Because watching food being made is part of eating food. She says this like it's obvious, which she has clearly decided it is. If you can see it, you want it more. If you see the taiyaki going gold in the mold, you're already halfway to ordering one. Nell makes the small sound she makes when she agrees with something but doesn't want to commit to the word yes. Eldrick looks at the room, at the ceiling, at the street through the window where the evening foot traffic is already building. What do we call it, he says. Tess and Nell look at each other. We don't know, Tess says. We've never seen anything like it. Neither have I, Eldrick says. None of them have a word for it yet. It doesn't matter. The shape of the thing is already clear. That night he can't stop thinking about the street, not about the building work. Not about costs or timelines, about what happens after it's built. People walking through, picking things, eating outside, eating on the way somewhere. The ramen is good, but ramen is a sit-down thing, a table thing. If someone is in a hurry, if someone has somewhere to be, what do they take with them? He falls asleep at the kitchen table with his thoughts still running and goes straight into the vision without transition. No sense of falling asleep, just suddenly elsewhere. Hands. Not his hands, he's watching from somewhere else. Watching a pair of hands that know exactly what they're doing. They work with rice, cooked rice, slightly sticky, still warm. The hands scoop a portion, press it flat in the palm, place a small amount of filling in the center, something dark and salty, and then close the rice around it, pressing firmly, rotating, shaping. 3 corners emerge, a triangle dense and compact, the filling sealed inside. Then a strip of dark, dried seaweed wraps around the base, thin, slightly glossy, and the whole thing becomes something you can hold without it falling apart. Small, self-contained, no bowl required, no spoon. You pick it up and you eat it walking if you want to. Eldrick wakes up. It's early, still dark outside. He sits at the table for a moment with his hands flat on the surface, feeling the shape of the thing in his palms from the memory of someone else's hands. Rice. He has rice. Filling. Salted fish. Pickled vegetables. Cooked minced meat. The dark wrapping. Dried seagrass. The flat kind. Sold in sheets at the harbor market. He's seen it. He's never bought it. Never had a reason to. He has a reason now. He goes to the market when it opens. The first 10 onigiri fall apart. He buys the short grain rice. The kind the harbor traders use, which clumps when cooked. Unlike the long grain rice he's used to. Cooks it. Lets it cool until it's warm but not hot. The temperature where it holds together but doesn't burn your hands. Tries to form the triangle shape. The rice shifts, falls. He tries again, pressing harder. It holds for a moment and then splits along the side. Nell watches from the doorway, eating a taiyaki she made for herself. What's wrong with it? It doesn't hold. Why not? I don't know. He tries again, falls apart again. The rice in the vision held. These don't, maybe the ones in the vision were drier. He thinks about this. The hands in the vision, they weren't scooping fresh cooked rice, he realizes. The rice had been cooked and then sat for a while, losing some of the steam, losing some of the wet softness. He has been working with rice that is too fresh, too moist, too ready to collapse under pressure rather than compact. He cooks a new batch and leaves it to cool for 30 minutes, then 40, then an hour, tries the triangle shape. The rice holds, packs together under his palms, the 3 corners forming cleanly. He wraps the base with the dried seaweed, a single strip pressed flat against the rice, adhering from the slight moisture, and holds it up. It doesn't fall apart. He puts salted fish in the next one, pickled radish in the one after that, minced pork cooked with soy and garlic, the same flavors as the ramen. So there's a logic to it. In the third, he lines them up on the counter, and Nell puts down her taiyaki and comes over. She picks up the salted fish one, looks at it, turns it over, bites the corner, she chews slowly, looks at the wall. The seaweed, she says, what about it? It's the thing that makes it make sense. Without the seaweed, it's just rice. With the seaweed, she takes another bite, it's a whole thing. It has a flavor from the outside and a flavor from the inside, and they're different. She finishes it, picks up the pickled radish one. You're putting these on the street in front of people who are walking somewhere. This is not something they expected to eat today. They'll buy it because they can see it. It looks simple. It cost almost nothing. She eats the second one. And then they'll come back for the ramen tonight because they're thinking about you already. Eldrick makes 20 more. Adjusts the salt in the filling. Needs to be stronger because there's a lot of rice around it. And the rice is bland. The filling has to carry more weight than it would on its own. He makes the 20th one, holds it up, looks at it. It is, in the simplest possible terms, a triangle of rice, a thing you make with your hands, and a strip of dried grass from the sea and whatever you have in the kitchen. It should not feel like an achievement. Somehow it does. You're like a sculptor, Nell says, watching him make the 21st. Sculptors don't eat their work. He eats the 21st one. Choose, thinks, more salt, he says. The pork one needs more salt. He makes the 22nd one. The food court opens on a Wednesday, which nobody planned. It was simply ready on a Wednesday. And Eldrick saw no reason to wait for a more auspicious day. 3 counters along the connected spaces, ramen at the back, taiyaki by the window where the smell carries into the street, onigiri at the front near the door for people who are already leaving somewhere. Tess manages the floor with the focused energy of someone who has been given a larger instrument to play and is very much enjoying the upgrade. Nell runs the kitchen like a military operation with better food. Eldrick moves between the counters checking temperatures, timing the level of broth in the pot, whether the taiyaki molds are clean between batches. It works better than the single room worked, which was already working well. The open layout does what Tess said it would. People see the food being made and they want it before they've decided to want it. They watch the taiyaki come out of the mold gold and steaming, and their hand is already reaching for coins. People start arriving from outside the city within the first 2 weeks. Not many at first. A merchant who heard about it from another merchant. A family who came through on the way north and were told to stop. A minor official from the next town who was apparently very specific in his instructions to his travel companion about which street to find and which bowl to order. Word travels the way it travels through people who ate something and couldn't stop talking about it. The other establishments on the street watch this. Eldrick notices them noticing. A woman who runs a meat pie stand 3 doors down has started positioning herself at her front window for long stretches of time, not serving anyone, just looking at the queue. The brothers who run the grain soup place at the end of the block have had 2 visible arguments in the past week. Outside, which they clearly think is private, but the street is a public space and Tess hears everything. They're unhappy, Tess tells Eldrick one evening. I know, not normal unhappy. Something is going to happen unhappy. Eldrick is checking the broth. What kind of something? I don't know yet. She picks up her tray. But I'd watch the building at night. He means to think about this more carefully. He gets busy. He doesn't think about it carefully enough. The fire starts sometime after the second bell of night. Eldrick smells it before he hears anything. A char smell. Wood smoke. Not the good kind that means someone's cooking. He's out the back door and around the front before he's fully awake. The dining hall, the big room he renovated first, the one with the long tables and the good benches and the reed awnings Tess spent a week arranging, is burning from the east wall outward. The awnings went fast, being reeds. The tables are going now. The light is orange and aggressive and throws long shadows across the street cobbles. He stands in the street and watches it. Tess appears beside him from somewhere. She doesn't say anything. She has the look she gets when she's processing something very quickly and doesn't have output ready yet. Nell comes 20 minutes later, still pulling her coat on. Hair loose. She lives close. She saw the light from her window. She stops next to Eldrick and surveys what's left. The dining hall gone or goings. The kitchen building standing. She looks at the kitchen building carefully, checking the walls for heat spread. Kitchen, she says, fine. Stores untouched. A pause. The burning hall makes its noises, the crack and settle of things giving way. Then we work tomorrow, Nell says. Tess turns to look at her. The hall is on fire. The hall, Nell says, is not the kitchen. She watches a roof beam come down in a slow orange collapse. We serve outside. Torin arrives at the food court at 6 in the morning because Eldrick knocked on his door at 5, and Torin, to his credit, got dressed without argument when he understood what had happened. He doesn't say anything about the burned-out hall. He looks at it once, assesses the structural situation with the eye of someone who works with materials and knows what they do under heat, and then turns to the practical problem. They drag tables into the street. It takes an hour and the result is not elegant. Tables at various angles. Benches that don't quite match. The whole arrangement following no plan except the plan of where there was space, and what was heavy enough that 2 men could carry it. Tess walks out and looks at the arrangement. This looks, she starts, like after a fire, Eldrick says, because it is after a fire. She opens her mouth and closes it. I was going to say it looks like the tables belong to the street now, like the street is the dining room. Eldrick looks at the tables in the morning light, the cobblestones still damp from the night, the burned wall visible at the end of the row. Benches facing outwards so people can watch the street while they eat. Leave them, he says. The morning customers come and find tables in the road. Some of them stop and stare and then keep walking, which Eldrick expected. Most of them stop and sit, which he also expected. One man sits down, settles himself, looks around at the open sky above him, and the street life moving past and says, this is like a picnic. His companion looks at the ramen Nell as already sliding out the kitchen window on a board. With ramen, the man's companion says, I was going to say that's better than a picnic, the first man says. But I didn't want to be rude about picnics. By mid-morning, the outdoor arrangement has taken on its own atmosphere. Not worse than the hall. Different, louder, more airs. Children run between the benches in ways they couldn't inside. Bren sits at the end of the longest table with his bowl and a view of the street and looks, if anything, more comfortable than usual. That night, Eldrick falls asleep on the kitchen floor, which is where he's been sleeping since the fire because it's closer to the work. And the vision comes almost immediately, as though it was waiting for him to stop moving long enough to deliver it. A cast iron plate set over heat. Across its surface, 7 circular indentations, each about the size of a large coin deep enough to hold something. Batter similar to the taiyaki batter, thin and egg pale poured into each hollow. Then a small piece of octopus, cut small, dropped into the center of each pool of batter. Then a thin skewer, almost a needle, used to turn the half-formed ball at exactly the right moment. When the bottom has set but the top is still liquid, so that when it flips, the liquid part runs down into the new bottom, and the whole thing becomes a sphere cooked from all sides. Round complete, done in 2 minutes. Toppings after a dark, savory sauce and a zigzag. A thread of something white and thick. Thin pink flakes that move in the heat like they're alive, curling and settling, curling again. Eldrick lies on the kitchen floor and works through the logistics. The plate, that's Torin. That's a conversation he's had twice already, and Torin will make whatever sound he makes when asked for a third unusual cooking implement. The octopus, the harbor market has it. It's expensive but not impossible. The toppings, the dark sauce, is something he can build from what he has. The white thread, something thick and tangy. The pink flakes, he has no idea. He'll work that out. He gets up and walks to Torin's. Torin opens the door, looks at Eldrick. Another mold. Torin says it is not a question. Different. Is it a fish? No. What shape? Spheres. Hollow indentations in a flat plate. 6 or 7 of them. Each one, Eldrick holds up his fingers to show the diameter. Deep enough to hold batter. The batter cooks in the hollow and gets turned into a ball. Torin stares at him for a long time. The stare has evolved since their first meeting. The first time it communicated skepticism. The second time, resigned professionalism. This time it communicates something else. The look of a craftsman who has started to find a client genuinely interesting against his will. You got burned out, Torin says. The dining hall and your first thought was a new cooking plate. My first thought was getting the tables outside. This was my second thought. Torin exhales through his nose. Bring food, he says, and closes the door. The takoyaki come together faster than the taiyaki did, because Eldrick has learned something about how the visions work. They don't give you the final version of the recipe, they give you the shape of it, and the details are yours to find. He knows the shape, round, savory octopus inside turned at a specific moment. The details are the question. The first batch he turns too early. The batter hasn't set on the bottom, and the whole thing collapses when the skewer touches it, leaving a smear of half-cooked dough in the indentation. He cleans the plate, tries again, waits longer. Too long this time. The ball forms, but it's lopsided. The bottom overcooked before the flip. Count it, Nell says. She's watching from behind his shoulder. What? Count the seconds you need the same time every batch. Not feel count. He counts on the third try. 18 seconds. Too early. The bottom is not ready. He tries 25. Too late. The shape is already determined and won't form into a sphere. He tries 21. At 21 seconds, the skewer goes in and the half-set ball turns cleanly, and the liquid batter runs down into the new base and the sphere forms, slowly as he keeps turning it. Rolling it gently in the hollow, coaxing the shape from the physics of the thing. 2 minutes on heat. Off. He picks one up. It's round. Genuinely round. Not lopsided. Not a flattened disc pretending. He cuts it open. The outside is firm and slightly crisp. The inside is soft, just barely cooked through. In the center, the piece of octopus chewy with the sea salt still in it. A completely different texture from everything around it. He puts the dark sauce on in a zigzag. He's made it from a reduction of his soy marinade with a little sugar and vinegar, a version of the broth's logic applied differently. The white thread is a thick yogurt cream he's been working on for 2 days. Tangy, which cuts the richness. The pink flakes are still a problem. He uses very thin shaved dried fish instead, and the residual heat from the ball makes them curl and move as he watches, exactly like the vision showed. He puts a finished piece in front of Nell. She eats it in one bite because it's designed to be eaten in one bite. Choose once, twice, 3 times. The outside is crisp, she says. Yes, but it's not fried. It's not oily. How? The batter sets against the iron. The iron is the heat. You get the texture without the oil. She picks up another one. Eats it. People are going to burn their mouths, she says. Yes, they're going to do it anyway. Yes, then you should warn them, she picks up a third. Or don't. They'll figure it out. The outdoor tables are still in the street when the takoyaki appear on the board. Wrapped in paper. 5 to a serve. Still steaming. People unwrap them on the bench and burn their mouths immediately and don't mind. The sound of the street gets louder, laughter mostly. The specific laughter of people who knew a thing was hot and did it anyway. Across the road in the doorway of the grain soup establishment, one of the brothers stands watching. He set a fire 2 nights ago. He expected to come out this morning and see a closed door and a sign in the end of something. Instead, there are tables in the street and a new smell he doesn't recognize. And the same queue, the same length, the same people, and somewhere in it a child who has just burned the roof of her mouth on a small round ball and is laughing with her eyes watering. He stands in his doorway for a long time, then he goes back inside without speaking and the door closes behind him. Eldrick hires 2 night guards the morning after the fire. He finds them through Bren, who knows everyone and everyone's availability, and who produces 2 large, quiet men by the end of the day with the efficiency of someone who has been waiting to be useful in exactly this way. The guards are brothers Vor and Cal. Vor is taller, Cal is wider. Neither of them speaks much. They walk the perimeter of the food court from the 2nd bell of night to the 5th, and they take this seriously in the way that people who are paid fairly tend to take things seriously. 1 week after the first fire at the 3rd bell of night, Cal finds 2 men at the east wall of the kitchen building, with a clay pot of oil and a length of wick. He takes the pot away from them. He takes the wick. He and Vor hold the 2 men against the wall, not cruelly, just firmly, the way you hold a door shut against wind until morning. Baldric arrives at 6 to find 2 men sitting on the ground with their backs against the kitchen wall and Vor, and Cal standing over them with the unhurried posture of people who have been there for hours and are not tired. He looks at the men on the ground. He looks at the clay pot and the wick that Cal has set to one side. He crouches down so he's at eye level with the men. "Who sent you?" he says. They don't answer immediately. He waits. He is. Tess has observed unusually good at waiting. Not as a tactic, simply as a state of being. He just stays where he is and looks at them. One of them talks first, then the other fills in what the first one left out. And they contradict each other twice. And from the contradictions, Eldrick extracts what's true. 7 establishments. Southern Street mostly. They pooled money, they had a plan. The first fire was supposed to finish it, and when it didn't, they tried again. He writes down the names. All 7. Tess is standing behind him listening. Her expression is the expression she uses when she's receiving information that she will file carefully and use later. Neutral, attentive, slightly distant, like a person sorting mail. Eldrick goes to the city administrator's office at 8 in the morning with a written statement. The names of 7 establishments, the testimony of 2 guards, and a clay pot of oil that he carries through the door and sets on the administrator's desk without comment. The administrator looks at the pot, looks at Eldrick. Looks at the pot again. "This is evidence," Eldrick says. The administrator picks up the statement and reads it. He reads it twice. He is a careful man. Eldrick has dealt with him before, over permits for the food court expansion, and found him slow but thorough. "You're not pressing for punishment yourself," the administrator says. "I'm pressing for process," Eldrick says. "Shut the ones that need shutting. Warn the rest. That's all I want." 3 of the 7 establishments are closed for inspection by the end of the week. The other 4 receive official warnings that are, by the administrator's own description, strongly worded. 2 of the inspections find genuine violations that have nothing to do with the fire. A grain soup operation serving meat of uncertain origin, a pie stand with a drainage problem that would have come up eventually regardless. Tess watches Eldrick come out of the administrator's office and fall into step beside him. "I expected you to go to them directly," she says. "That's what they wanted. You making a scene. Me making a mistake. Showing up at someone's door in anger. That's a story they get to tell. Filing a complaint with evidence." He walks for a moment. "That's a story they're in." Tess considers this. "You've thought about this kind of thing before." "I've had debts collected," he says. You learn the difference between problems you solve and problems you hand to people whose job it is to solve them. The food court settles into a new rhythm after the second fire attempt. Not nervous, not tense, simply more deliberate. The guards stay. Vor has started eating dinner at the court every night before his shift, which nobody formalized but everyone accepted. Cal's wife brings their 2 children on Saturdays for taiyaki, which Cal pretends not to notice but clearly arranged. One evening when the outdoor tables are full and the light is going golden and the air smells of broth and charcoal, Tess comes to find Eldrick in the kitchen. We don't have drinks, she says. Eldrick is tasting the broth. We have tea. Men come in the evenings. They eat. They want to sit. With what? With tea. She leans against the doorframe. Tea is what you drink when you're cold or sick. Evening is for beer. I don't know how to make beer. Tess looks at him with the specific patience she reserves for when he says things like this. 3 months ago, she says, you didn't know how to make anything on this menu. He finds Maddie's through the harbor market. Someone who knows an old brewer who lives at the edge of town and doesn't brew anymore because his back gave out 2 years ago and the barrels are too heavy. Eldrick walks to the edge of town with 2 bowls of ramen wrapped in cloth. Maddie's is a thin man, older, with the kind of face that has been weathered by decades of steam and grain dust into something permanent. He opens the door and looks at the cloth-wrapped bowls. He looks at Eldrick. What do you want, he says, to learn how to make beer? I don't teach. Eldrick holds up the bowls. I brought ramens. Maddie's looks at the bowls again, a pause that contains a negotiation. Come in. He says he eats both bowls slowly, thoughtfully, with the evaluative attention of someone who takes flavor seriously. And then he talks. Malt, barley that's been allowed to begin sprouting and then dried, which converts the starch to sugar. Water important. The mineral content matters. Hard water makes bitter beer. Soft water makes it round. Hops, the flour, dried, added at various stages to balance the sweetness and add bitterness and preserve the whole thing. Yeast, the living part, the part that eats the sugar and makes alcohol and carbon dioxide, and is, Maddie says, the part that kills the batch if you treat it wrong. How long? Eldrick asks. For a basic ale, 2 weeks to ferment, 1 to condition. Maddie's looks at his empty bowl. Beer is patience and patient people make vinegar. The first batch takes 2 weeks and tastes flat. Not bad, not sour, not wronged, just thin like it hasn't arrived at itself yet. Maddie's comes to taste it. He sits with the cup for a long time, longer than seems necessary. Then not vinegar but flats. Not enough hops. Second batch, more hops. Eldrick follows Maddie's instruction and adds them at 2 different points in the boil. Early for bitterness, late for aroma. Ferments for 10 days, conditions for 5. Brings a cup to Maddie's. Maddie's drinks it. He holds the cup between both hands. He looks out the window. He looks back at the cup. Too bitter, he says. Eldrick goes home and thinks about the balance. Bitterness and sweetness are not enemies. They're a ratio. When one goes up, the other needs to come up too, or the whole thing tips. He adds dark malt to the 3rd batch, which Maddie's told him makes a heavier beer with bread notes. Roast it slightly himself over low heat until it smells like the crust of a good loaf. Adjust the hops down slightly. Wait. Maddie's tastes the 3rd batch at Eldrick's kitchen table on a Tuesday morning. He drinks half the cup. He sets it down. He looks at the cup for what feels like a very long time. He looks like a man who is either about to say something significant or fall asleep. And it is genuinely difficult to tell which. Passable, he says. Nell, who is at the counter and has been watching this, looks at Eldrick. Eldrick looks at Nell. This is the highest praise either of them has heard Maddie's give anything. What does passable mean? Nell says to Maddie's. It means I drink it again, Maddie says. It does not mean I would travel for it. He picks up the cup and finishes it yet. That afternoon, Eldrick offers Maddie's the space next to the kitchen building for a small brewery with a room above it where the barrels can't reach him. Maddie says he'll think about it. He moves in on Thursday. Nell invents the lemonade. This is not a plan. Nell doesn't make plans in the way Tess makes plans. She makes observations and then acts on them without announcing either step. The observation is, children have teppanyaki, which is wonderful, but it's food. And sometimes they want something to drink that isn't tea and isn't small beer and isn't water. The action is, lemons from the market water, honey instead of sugar, because honey rounds the edge of the sourness rather than just cutting it, and a small handful of dried mint that she grows herself and keeps in a jar above the kitchen window. She puts it in a clay pitcher and sets it on the counter and tells Tess to charge 3 copper a cup. Tess tastes it first. Her eyes go slightly wide. What is this? Lemon, Nell says. And other things. It's cold. I put it in the cold room. Tess takes another sip. Children are going to destroy us with this. Good. Nell says they were already destroying us with the teppanyaki. Now they have a drink too. The first evening with beer and lemonade both on the board is a Friday. The outdoor tables filled by the 5th hour. Men with bowls of ramen and cups of the dark ale Maddie's declared passable, and which is, Eldrick has to admit, better than most of what the city's taverns serve. Children at the low tables with their fish and their lemonade, sticky-handed and loud in the good way. The air smells like broth and hops and something sweet from the taiyaki molds. Tess moves between the tables with the easy efficiency of someone who is exactly where they're supposed to be. She doesn't smile much while she works. She's too focused for that. But occasionally passing a table where something is going particularly right, there is an expression on her face that is not quite a smile, but lives in the same neighborhood. Bran is at his usual spot at the end of the long table, the one that has become so thoroughly his that other customers leave a slight gap around it out of unconscious respect. He has a full cup of beer and a half-eaten bowl, and the expression of a man in complete agreement with the current moment. This, he says to no one specifically, is the best establishment in the city. Nobody responds. Everyone is eating. He waits. In the city, he says, louder, still eating. He picks up his cup. In the Empire, he says, I'm amending my previous statement. This is the best establishment in the Empire. He takes a long drink, puts the cup down. I stand by that. Eldrick, passing with a tray, says, you've been to 2 cities. I know what I know, Bren says without any defensiveness at all. Eldrick goes back to the kitchen. Behind him, the outdoor tables go on making their noise. The particular dense, comfortable sound of many people eating well at once. A sound that is, if you have spent years hoping for it, not nothing at all. The first person to arrive from out of town is a wool merchant named Peck, who heard about the ramen from a grain trader, who heard about it from a carter, who stopped here 6 weeks ago on his way north. Peck arrives on a Tuesday, ties his horse at the post outside, and comes in with the slightly aggressive purposefulness of a man who has traveled 2 days on a specific recommendation and needs it to be worth it. He sits down, he orders the ramen, he eats it. He sits with the empty bowl for a while. Then he calls Tess over and asks if he can get 2 more bowls packed for the road. Tess, who has not been asked this before, goes to the kitchen and comes back with 2 bowls sealed under cloth. She charges him double for the containers. Peck pays without negotiating, which for a wool merchant is essentially a standing ovation. 3 weeks later, a minor official arrives with his secretary and his secretary's assistant. All 3 of whom eat ramen and taiyaki and onigiri, and drink 2 rounds of the dark ale, and who leave very satisfied and slightly surprised at themselves for how much they spent. The official secretary is overheard telling the secretary's assistant that this was worth the detour. The word for what is happening spreads in the specific way of things that are genuinely good, not through announcement, not through anyone's plan, but through the unreliable and completely reliable mechanism of people telling other people about a thing they experienced and want to share. Eldrick notices the out-of-town guests, the way you notice a gradual change in the weather. Not the moment it begins, but one day you look up and the sky is different, and you realize it's been different for a while. He mentions it to Tess one afternoon while wiping down the counter. It's the story, Tess says, without looking up from her order tallies. What story? The one people tell when they leave here. She puts down her pen. People eat everywhere every day. They don't talk about most of it. It's just eating. It's just Tuesday. But when something surprises them, she gestures at the room. They have to tell someone, not because they want to promote you, because the surprise is still in them and they need somewhere to put it. Eldrick wipes the same section of counter he already wiped. So they tell people, and those people file it away. And when they happen to be passing through, they remember. Or they don't happen to be passing through, but they decide to be. She picks up her pen again. You could have braised beef for 7 years, and nobody came from 2 days away. 1 bowl of ramen and someone rode a horse through mud to get here. The beef was fine. The beef, Tess says with the precise diplomacy of someone who disagrees completely, was fine. The delegation from Varen arrives on a Thursday with a flag. Not a large flag, a small one, carried by a young man whose job is apparently exclusively to carry the small flag, and who holds it with the concentrated dignity of someone performing a task they take seriously, regardless of its scale. Behind him, 2 officials in town colors, a letter with a wax seal, and the general atmosphere of bureaucratic goodwill. The lead official introduces himself as Harwick, representative of the Burgomeister of the city of Varen, 2 days east. He has clearly prepared remarks and is preparing to deliver them. Tess seats them at the good table, takes their hats, brings ramen immediately before anyone asks, and then removes herself to a position where she can hear everything. Harwick's prepared remarks are, the Burgomaster has heard excellent things about Eldrick's establishment through multiple independent sources. He names 3 and wishes to extend a formal invitation to open a branch of the food court in Varen, in a location that the city would provide. On terms that Harwick is authorized to negotiate, he puts the letter on the table. He looks at Eldrick. Eldrick looks at the letter, then at Harwick, then at the ramen in front of Harwick, which Harwick has not yet touched. Eat first, Eldrick says. Harwick blinks. I beg. The ramen gets worse when it sits. Eat first. We'll talk after. Harwick looks at the bowl. He looks at the letter. He picks up the spoon. The prepared remarks and the letter wait on the table while Harwick eats, his colleague eats. Even the young man with the flag is given a bowl, which he accepts with an expression of profound relief, and eats with the concentrated attention of someone who has been holding a flag for 2 days. When the bowls are empty, Eldrick says, "I'll think about it." Harwick seems to have expected more negotiation. "The terms we're prepared to offer are probably good terms," Eldrick says. "I'll think about it." Before they leave, Tess packs 6 onigiri in cloth for the road, 2 of each filling, and adds a small jar of the dark ale sealed with wax. Harwick takes them with genuine warmth. The flag-bearer tucks his flag under one arm to hold his onigiri properly. They ride out. Tess comes to stand beside Eldrick in the doorway. "You're gonna say no for now." "Why?" Eldrick looks at the food court, the 3 counters, the kitchen building, the outdoor tables, the small brewery that Maddie's is currently moving his 4th barrel into, the flag of smoke from the kitchen, the queue that starts forming an hour before they open. "There are things here that aren't finished yet," he says. "When will they be finished?" He looks at the kitchen window where Nell is visible, moving between the fires. "I don't know, it's a kitchen. I don't think kitchen's finished." Tess considers this. That is either very wise or a convenient way to avoid expanding. "Probably both," Eldrick says. Maddie's has over the past month become a fixture of the food court in the way that objects become fixtures, not through announcement, but through simple continued presence until everyone forgets they were ever absent. He arrives each morning before Eldrick does, which Eldrick discovered accidentally on a day he came in early and found Maddie's already in the brewery, checking the temperature of the fermenting batch with the focused seriousness of someone monitoring a patient. He goes home in the evening after checking the barrels one more time, which takes approximately 4 minutes, but which he treats as a substantial procedure. He has developed a 4th batch of beer. The development, by Maddie's account, happened because he found dark malt at the harbor market from a southern trader and bought it on the basis that it looked interesting, which is as close as Maddie's comes to impulse purchase. He roasted it further himself slowly until it was nearly black. Added it to the 4th batch in small quantity, not to replace the other malts to join them. The result smells like bread, specifically like the heel of a dark loaf, the part with the deep crust warm from the oven. The color is very dark, nearly opaque, with a thin layer of foam that holds its shape longer than the lighter ale. The first evening it's served, 3 different guests ask Tess why it smells like bread. 2 of them order a second cup immediately afterward. One of them, a baker from the North Quarter who comes every Thursday, sits with the cup under his nose for almost a full minute before drinking it, and then looks slightly offended. The way a craftsman looks when they encounter good work in a medium they consider their own. Eldrick tells Maddie's the guests are asking about the bread smell. Maddie says it's the dark malt. "I roasted it until it was almost carbon." The heat converts them, tell the guests that Eldrick says. Maddie's looks at him as if Eldrick has suggested he take up dancing. "I don't talk to people. You talk to me. You're different." "Why am I different?" "Because you're in the kitchen," Maddie says. "People in kitchens are tolerable. People at tables are." He searches for the word unpredictable. "Tell Tess then." "She'll tell them. Tess talks too much." "That's exactly why." Maddie's looks away. He has the expression he gets when he knows he's lost the argument and is not ready to admit it. He goes back to his barrels. Next evening, Tess is overheard at table 5 explaining to 3 guests that the dark ale smells of bread because the malt has been roasted slowly until it reaches something close to the crust of a dark loaf, and the heat changes the sugars into compounds that the nose reads as baked grain, and the man who makes it has been brewing for 30 years and has opinions about water hardness that he will share if you make the mistake of asking. The 3 guests are delighted by this. One of them immediately asks to speak to Maddie's. Maddie's in the brewery hears this request relayed by Tess. He is quiet for a moment. He looks at his barrel. He looks at the door. "Tell them," he says. "The water should be soft." Tess waits. "Tell them if the water is too hard. It adds calcium and magnesium, and both of those push the bitterness in directions you can't correct later." He picks up his ladle. "Tell them that's all." Tess goes back to the table and tells them. The guests receive this as though it is a gift, which it is. They order another round. The food court at the end of 2 months. Ramen, teiyaki, onigiri, takoyaki, 2 kinds of beer, lemonade, tables in the street. A kitchen that runs from before dawn to past the second bell of night. A brewer who claims to hate people and explains water mineral content to them through an intermediary. A waitress who knows what you want before you've decided. A cook who wipes the same section of counter twice when he's thinking guests come from 2 days away, guests from 3. Bren comes every morning for the onigiri and every evening for the ramen, which he has eaten more of than any person alive, and which he still eats with the full attention of someone eating it for the first time, because he says, when something is this good, you owe it your full attention every time. Eldrick does not entirely understand how this happened. He made something because he saw it and his hands knew how. He made something else for the same reason. Then a few things more. He kept the recipe secret, fixed the problems, paid attention to what the food needed and what the guests needed. And all of this, the street and the people and the smell and the sound, assembled itself around the act of cooking. The way a life assembles itself around doing the thing you're supposed to do. He is not sure he could explain this to anyone. He is not sure he needs, and at some point in the past few months the line between them dissolved. He sits on the stool at the central counter, checks something on the stove, means to stand up, and is asleep before he makes the decision not to be. What he sees a tray dark wood lacquered on its skewers. Each one carries 3 pieces of fruit, apple, strawberry, grape, and each piece of fruit is covered in something that is not quite sugar and not quite glass. It's thin, perfectly even clear. So you can see the color of the fruit underneath. The red of the apple's skin. The deep purple of the grapes. The bright specific red of the strawberry. The surface catches light and throws it back. Not like food. Like something made in a jewelry shop. Something that belongs under glass in a cabinet. He reaches out and takes one. Bites through the outer layer. A sound like a thin pane of ice breaking. A clean crack. And then the fruit underneath, cold and sharp in contrast with the sweetness of the caramel, 2 things at once, the hard shell and the soft fruit, the sweet and the tart. He wakes up with the crack still in his ears. The kitchen is empty, afternoon light on the counters. And on the counter directly in front of him, placed there with obvious intention, a folded piece of paper. He unfolds it. City Fair, 3 weeks from the first of the month, culinary competition, open to all establishments within the province panel. Tess is in the kitchen doorway. She is watching him read with the expression of someone who has prepared for several possible responses and is waiting to deploy the right one. You put this here while I was asleep, Eldrick says. I put it there 10 minutes before you fell asleep, Tess says. But you fell asleep before you could read it. So effectively, yes. That's manipulation. That, she says, is care. There's a difference. She leans against the doorframe. You were going to find a reason to say it wasn't worth the bother. I removed the opportunity. Eldrick looks at the announcement again, 3 weeks, Imperial Palace. He thinks about the vision, the tray, the cracking shell, the light caught in the caramel. His hands are already thinking about sugar. We need good fruit, he says. Tess smiles just slightly. I already asked Bren which market, sugar and water. That's all caramel is in theory. Eldrick knows this. He also knows by the end of his first attempt that knowing what something is made of and knowing how to make it are 2 entirely separate forms of knowledge. He dissolves sugar and water in a small pan, heats it. When it looks ready, or when it looks like what he imagines ready means, he dips an apple into it. The caramel coats the apple in a thick, cloudy layer, uneven. There are bubbles trapped inside it. When it cools, it's white, opaque instead of transparent, dull instead of shining. He taps it and it doesn't crack cleanly. It fractures in chunks, not right, not even close. He does it again, same result. He does it a 3rd time, hotter this time. The caramel turns brown before he can use it, burns. Nell watches the 3rd attempt from across the kitchen, saying nothing, which is how she watches when she's collecting enough information to have something useful to contribute. You're putting it in too early, she says. How do I know when it's ready? Color? She comes to stand beside him. Watch the color in the pan. Right now it's clear. That's just hot sugar water. It needs to change. She points at the pan. When it starts going gold, not brown, gold like honey, like amber, that's the window. After that it burns quickly. You have maybe 30 seconds. And the bubbles. Stop stirring when it starts to color. Stirring makes bubbles. Let it sit and let it find its own temperature. She steps back. Try again. 4th attempt. He watches the pan the way he watched the egg in part 2. The same quality of attention, the same patience that costs something. The sugar goes through its phases. Clear, then faintly yellow, then there. A gold that deepens as he watches. Honey-colored, and then he can smell it. A smell that is sweet and slightly burnt in the best way. Caramel without the char. He pulls the pan, dips the apple, the caramel runs over it in a thin, even sheet, still sets in seconds, contracting slightly to the shape of the fruit. He holds it up in the kitchen light. It's clear, not perfectly clear, not yet, not this attempt. But nearly the red skin of the apple is visible through it. It shines, he taps it, the crack is clean. 5th attempt, he adds a few drops of vinegar to the sugar water before heating, which Nell suggests and which Eldrick is skeptical about. The 6th batch with the vinegar is the one that works. Thin, glassy, the sound of it breaking like a note on a small bell. Nell tastes it. She holds it in front of the window for a moment first, looking at the light through the caramel shell. Beautiful, she says. Then, like a concession and good, Torin comes through the kitchen as he does occasionally. He has developed the habit of appearing when he smells something interesting, which he would deny if asked, but which has become reliable enough that Eldrick sometimes leaves food where Torin will find it. He sees the apple on the counter, picks it up without asking, bites off a third of it and chews. He looks at the ceiling, he looks at the apple, he looks at Eldrick. When are you selling these? He says. Fair, Eldrick says. 3 weeks. Torin finishes the apple, puts the stick down, make more. 3 fruits. 3 problems. The apple is solved. The grape and the strawberry each have their own particular demands, and Eldrick spends the next week discovering them one at a time. The grape. Small, smooth, perfectly round. It looks ideal. The problem is the skin, which is thin and under tension, and when you push a skewer through it, the skin splits and juice comes out, and the wet surface means the caramel won't adhere properly. It runs off in sheets instead of coating. Solution, which takes 3 days and several ruined clusters. The skewer goes in through the stem end, where the skin is toughest. Done slowly with rotation, not force. The hole seals mostly as the skewer goes in. Juice loss minimal. Caramel holds. The strawberry is the hardest. A strawberry is not dry. A strawberry is by its nature wet. It releases moisture constantly. And moisture is caramel's enemy. The first strawberry attempt, the caramel slides off in a ring when it sets, pooling on the stick below the fruit. The second, he dries the strawberries with cloth beforehand, still slides slower. The third, he dries them, then leaves them out for 2 hours on a cloth in the kitchen. Enough surface moisture evaporates. The caramel holds. Nell is the one who dries the strawberries. She develops a system: cloth on the counter, berries arranged stem down, turned once every half hour. She spends the better part of 2 afternoons doing this, and when Eldrick says it's just a small detail, she gives him a look that communicates, without any words at all, that he should not describe it that way again. Every part of a dish, she says, is the most important part. The bother of the strawberries is why the strawberry ones are the best. Eldrick tries one. She's right. The strawberry under the caramel shell is cold and sharp, and its sourness against the sweet caramel is cleaner than the apple. More surprising. More salt, he says. Salt? On the caramel a pinch before it sets. He's thinking about the taiyaki, the bean paste that needed salt to make the sweetness work. The same logic applies here. Try it. Nell tries it on the next batch. The salt catches in the caramel surface. And when you bite through the shell, it hits the tongue at the same moment as the sweet and the acid from the fruit. 3 things at once. She puts the strawberry down. She looks at the table. That's unfair. She says, what is? Making something that good and then going to a competition with it. Those other chefs have been cooking for 20 years. She picks up another strawberry. This is unfair to them. Eldrick takes one for himself. Good, he says. 2 days before the fair, Eldrick does a full test run. He sets up the caramel station in the kitchen. The pan, the vinegar, the pan of iced water for temperature control, the skewers, the drying cloth, the fruit laid out in order of preparation. He does the full sequence from cold fruit to finished stick, working through all 3 varieties, timing each stage, finding the rhythm. Apple the simplest, the most forgiving, 4 minutes from fruit to finished. The shell is the thickest and holds longest. Grape requires the most physical precision. The skewering takes time, but the finished piece is the most beautiful. The dark purple of the grape under the clear shell makes it look like something suspended in amber. Strawberry the most demanding. The drying time cannot be shortened, but Nell was right. It is the best one. He finishes the test run and lines them up on the counter. 12 pieces on 3 small trays, the 3 varieties separated. The kitchen light catches the caramel surfaces and the trays sparkle. Tess comes in, stops, and looks at the trays for a long moment. Take these to the fair table, she says, and people are going to reach for them before the competition even starts. That's the idea. She picks up a grape one, turns it in her fingers. What are the other contestants bringing? I don't know. Roast pies, things with sauce and technique, things that require plates. She bites through the shell. The crack is loud enough that Nell looks up from across the kitchen. You're bringing something people eat with their hands and want to look at first. She chews slowly. You know what that means. They'll either love it or think it's too simple. People always think simple is simple, Tess says, until they try to do it. She takes the second grape off its stick. Simple is just when you've solved all the hard parts and hidden them. Eldrick looks at the strawberry tray, the carefully dried berries, the exact temperature of the caramel, the pinch of salt caught in the surface, Nell's 2 afternoons of turning fruit on cloth. Yes, he says, that's what it is. The fair takes up 4 city blocks. Eldrick has been to this fair before, years ago when it was still the kind of event he attended as a customer, walking the stalls, buying a thing or two, eating something forgettable from a vendor cart. The culinary competition was always there. In the northeast corner, behind a rope barrier, with a panel of officials and tables arranged in a horseshoe. He walked past it every year. It never occurred to him to care. This year he arrives from the other side of the rope. 20 tables, one for each contestant, arranged in a long double row with a walking lane between them so the public can move freely from one to the next. The other contestants are already setting up when Eldrick arrives with Nell, Tess, and a basket of fruit. He sees in the first 30 seconds a chef from the capital with 2 apprentices and a portable brazier that folds out into a full cooking station. A woman from the eastern city who has brought her own flour in a sealed tin and is already rolling pastry with the focused efficiency of someone who does this as a form of thinking. A man with a large box of preserved meats and a collection of sauces in labeled jars. Another with live herbs growing in small pots, which he has clearly transported with great care. Then Eldrick puts his basket on the table. Inside 3 trays, nested fruit, a bag of sugar, a small pan, a bottle of vinegar, skewers. The chef at the next table, a broad man with a waxed mustache and a linen jacket embroidered with his establishment's name, glances at the basket. He says something to his apprentice. They both look at the basket again. The apprentice makes a small sound. They are not laughing loudly. It's the other kind, quiet, controlled, the kind that lives in the shoulders and the corner of the mouth. Eldrick puts his pan on the small brazier the fair has provided and does not look at them. The format: all contestants cook and present by the second bell. Then the fair opens to the public. People walk the tables, taste, collect a clay token from the tables they prefer. At the end of the hour, tokens are counted. The official who explains this is a small man with a large voice, who has clearly explained it many times and finds the task neither inspiring nor tedious. Simply a thing he does. He mentions that the judging panel will observe, but the public vote is primary. Eldrick files this information in the same place. He filed the information about Tessa's serving order adjustment. And the timing on the takoyaki, the place where useful things go to be used later. Good, he says. Tess beside him arranges the drying cloths for the strawberries. You said that like you meant it. Judges eat professionally. They're thinking about technique and tradition and what they've eaten before. He checks the temperature of his pan. People eat honestly. They're thinking about whether they want another one. Tess looks at the table across from them, where the capital chef is braising lamb in a pan with herbs that smell extraordinary, deep and green and complex. That smells incredible, she says. Yes, are you worried? Eldrick watches the caramel pan. I'm focused on my temperature. The capital chef's lamb is genuinely a beautiful piece of work. Eldrick watches it come together from across the lane, the sear on the outside creating a crust that holds the juices in. 3 separate sauces prepared in sequence with different aromatics. The whole thing plated with the precision of someone who has done this 1,000 times and makes each execution look effortless. 2 apprentices work like extensions of him, handing him things before he reaches for them. The Eastern woman's pie is the one that fills the whole corner of the fair with smell. She has rolled her pastry to an even thinness that catches the light, and the filling meat and herbs and something else. Something sweet that Eldrick can't quite identify from this distance is visible at the cut edge of the test slice she's left on the table. The pastry is gold, actually gold, the color of something heated perfectly and no more. Eldrick looks at both of them for a long moment. Good food, serious work, real skill that cost years to develop. He turns back to his pan. The caramel comes to temperature. Amber, the smell arriving just before the color gets there. The 30-second window opening. He dips the first apple, turns it, sets it on the rack he's built from 2 skewers balanced across the tray. Clear shell it shines. There, Nell says. He dips the grapes one at a time, careful with the skewering, not hurrying. Then the strawberries, which Nell has been drying for the past hour, turning every 15 minutes on the cloth, and which she hands over with the expression of someone transferring something valuable. The caramel shell on the strawberry is slightly thinner than the apples, slightly more transparent. And when the light hits it, the color of the berry underneath glows red and deep. He adds the salt, a pinch caught on the surface while the caramel is still slightly soft. The trays fill. He lines them up. Tess stands back and looks at the table. Then she looks at the other tables. The lamb with its architecture of sauces, the golden pie, the preserved meats arranged by color and cure, and at the end, 3 trays with sticks of fruit in a caramel shell, catching the afternoon light. Well, she says, let's see. The fair opens, the public comes in through the main gate and fans out through the stalls, and gradually, as people do at these things, gravitates toward the culinary section following their noses. They move through the horseshoe of tables with the browsing ease of people who have nowhere specific to be. The capital chef draws a crowd immediately. The smell of the lamb has been doing its work for 2 hours, and people recognize it and come. His table is surrounded within 10 minutes. People accept the tasting pieces on small squares of bread, eat them, nod, look impressed. Some of them go back for a second taste. His apprentices manage the flow professionally. The Eastern woman's pie creates a shorter but more intense crowd. People smelling it walk toward it without quite deciding to, and when they taste it their eyebrows go up. Eldrick's table gets its first visitor at the 12-minute mark, a child 7 or 8 wearing a coat slightly too big for him, which means it was bought for next year. He stops in front of the table and looks at the trays. He looks at them the way children look at things that are confusing but interesting. Not sure what they're seeing, but sure they want to understand it. He points at the apple one. Eldrick hands it over. The boy turns it in his fingers. He holds it up to the light. He doesn't know why he does this. It's just what the object invites. The caramel shell glows amber with the sun behind it. He bites the bottom of the apple. The crack is loud enough that the woman behind him, his mother, presumably looks up from the lamb table. Her son is standing with half a caramel apple in his hand, and an expression on his face that says something happened that he needs to process. She walks over. He holds the rest out to her. She takes a bite. She looks at the tray. How many can I? 1 token per person, Tess says pleasantly. But you can come back as many times as you like. The woman puts a token in the jar on the table and goes to get more coins. The boy is still standing there. Eldrick hands him another one. Grape this time. The boy holds it up to the light again. Same gesture. The grape, deep purple under the clear shell, looks like something gemstone dark. He bites it, looks at Eldrick. What is this called, he asks. Eldrick thinks about it. He's been calling it candied fruit in his head, which is accurate but not quite enough. I don't know yet, he says honestly. The boy considers this. It should have a good name, he says, with the firm certainty of someone who has opinions. Then he eats the rest of the grape and joins the line that has started forming at the end of the table. The capital chef notices at the half-hour mark. He's plating a new round of lamb tastings. He's done this dozens of times. The movement is automatic. And he looks up and sees the line at Eldrick's table. Not a crowd. Aligned, organized, moving steadily. People at the front getting their piece and stepping aside for the next person. Which means they have received the thing and want to think about it rather than stand there discussing it. He watches the line for a moment. He looks at his own table, which is still well attended but has the natural ebb and flow of a large crowd working its way around. It's sugar and fruit, he says to his apprentice, who is the nearest person. That's all it is. His apprentice, who has tried one of the great pieces when Eldrick wasn't looking and has not said so, makes a noncommittal sound. Tess is near enough to hear. She doesn't respond. Later to Eldrick, he's not wrong about what it's made of. He's wrong about what it is. Eldrick is watching the token jar. What is it? It's an event, she says. You hold it up to the light. You hear the crack. You have 3 flavors to choose from and they're all different. You feel like you picked something. You feel like you discovered something. She straightens the tray. The lamb is better food. Your fruit is a better experience. The token count takes 20 minutes. Eldrick, Nell, and Tess stand with the other contestants in a loose group while the officials do the counting. The capital chef stands with his arms crossed, which could mean confidence or could mean the other thing. The Eastern woman is very still. Several of the smaller contestants have the look of people who made peace with their position during the voting hour and are here for the formality. The head official reads the results from a paper. 3rd place, the Eastern woman's pie. She nods once, satisfied. 2nd place, the capital chef's lamb. The chef uncrosses his arms. 1st place, Eldrick's candied fruit, not by a large margin. The pie and the lamb were both genuinely good and genuinely popular, but first is first. The official says Eldrick's name, and the small crowd around the official's area makes the sound of a crowd approving something. Not loud, just present. The sound of people who voted for a thing and are pleased to find it won. The capital chef turns to look at Eldrick. His expression is not angry. It's genuinely baffled, the expression of someone whose calculation came out wrong and cannot locate the error. Where are you from, he says. Here, Eldrick says. This city. This is a provincial city. Yes. A pause. The chef looks at the trays of caramel fruit. He looks at the token jars that have already been carried to the counting table. He looks at Eldrick again. You didn't use a single knife, he says. I used one for the skewers, Eldrick says. Tess steps in before the pause can become uncomfortable. She turns to the chef with the pleasant neutral expression she uses when someone needs redirecting. He'll get used to it, she says quietly to Eldrick as they turn toward the official waiting with the documents. I'm not sure he will, Eldrick says. No, Tess agrees. Probably not, but it was a kind thing to say. The formal letter arrives 4 days later. 2 imperial couriers, full uniform, the letter and a case. They knock on the food court door at 8 in the morning while Nell is starting the broth, and Tess is updating the board and Eldrick is checking the malt. Maddie's has requested he procure from the southern market. Nell takes the letter. She reads it. She reads it again. She calls Tess over. Tess reads it. She calls Eldrick. Eldrick reads it. The language is formal and dense with ceremony, but the substance is plain. In recognition of his victory at the provincial culinary fair, the bearer is hereby invited to present himself at the imperial palace on the appointed date and prepare a dish for his imperial majesty. Tess, you're going to cook for the emperor. Eldrick looks at the seal on the letter. Heavy wax, deep red, the imperial bird pressed into it. He has seen this seal on tax documents and on the side of imperial collection wagons and on the notice that threatened his establishment when the debt was overdue. He has never seen it on something that was in any sense good news. What do I make him, he says. Neither of them answers. It's not a question they can answer. That night Eldrick sits in the kitchen after closing, and the vision comes with less distance than usual. Not in sleep, not quite, but in that thin territory between the two. The place where his hands have done the thinking for him more than once before. A plate white broad with a slight rim in the center, a dome of soft yellow. An omelet thin pale, the texture of something cooked gently and quickly, barely set. Underneath it, visible at the edges, rice, fried with small pieces of chicken and vegetables, colored orange-red from a sauce he doesn't have a name for. A cross cut down the center of the omelet. The egg falls open like a letter being unsealed, folding back in two soft panels, and the rice pushes through in a slow spill, not pouring, flowing, the way something warm and dense moves when you give it space. The sauce is dark and glossy, and goes across the top in a slow pour that follows the shape of the egg. Eldrick opens his eyes. He sits very still for a moment. Then he gets up, goes to the larder, and starts counting eggs. They leave before dawn on a Tuesday. Nell is at the food court door at the fourth bell, with a bag that contains 2 changes of clothes, her best knife rolled in cloth, a smaller knife rolled separately, and a jar of the soy sugar marinade she makes for the pork because she has decided she doesn't trust the palace to have what she considers acceptable soy sauce. She is ready before Eldrick is, which she doesn't comment on. Tess is there to see them off, which Eldrick didn't ask her to be, and which she did anyway. She looks at the bags, she looks at both of them. Don't embarrass us, she says. We'll try, Nell says. Eldrick looks back at the food court, the dark windows of the kitchen, the outdoor tables pushed to the side for the night, the faint smell of hops from Maddie's brewery that has become, without his noticing, the smell of arriving home. Watch the brewery, he says to Tess. Maddie's gets ideas when nobody's looking. What kind of ideas? New batches. He starts them and doesn't tell anyone, and then we have too much beer. Tess considers this. That seems like not the worst problem. It is when the barrels run out of room. He picks up his bag. 3 days there, 3 back. The ramen broth needs a full refresh on Thursday. Nell has written it down. Nell has written everything down, Tess says. She gave me 11 pages. Nell already walking toward the road. 10 the 11th is suggestions. They go. The road east is flat for the first day and hilly for the second. On the third day, the hills give way to something more deliberate. Roads wider, maintained. The kind of infrastructure that radiates outward from a place where money is concentrated. Other travelers increase. Official carriages. Supply wagons with imperial stamps. A group of minor officials on horseback who pass without acknowledging anyone. Eldrick barely sees any of it. He is thinking about the omelet. He's been thinking about it for 3 days, in the specific focused way he thinks about something when he's working through it. Not planning exactly. More like turning a problem until he can find its shape. The omelet in the vision was thin. He's made omelets before, thick ones, for the food court morning menu folded in half with cheese inside. Those are not this. The vision's omelet was something else. Pale, barely set, so fragile it couldn't support its own weight, and that fragility was the whole point. It needed to fall open when cut to yield, to release what was underneath. He has been trying to reconstruct the technique from the image. The pan must be hot, then cooled slightly before the egg goes in, too hot, and it sets too fast, too cold, and it takes too long and dries. The motion of the pan, he saw the motion in the vision, the way the omelet was moved constantly. A quick circular shake that kept it from sticking, that kept the unset egg moving toward the edges. It was a technique, not an accident. He tells Nell this on the second morning while they walk. She listens without interrupting, which is how she listens when she's going to have something useful to say at the end. You make things people want to watch, she says when he finishes. I make things people want to eat both. She adjusts her bag. The ramen, you lift it, and there's steam in the noodles move in the broth. The taiyaki, goldfish out of a mold. The caramel fruit, you hold it up to the light every time. She pauses. Now an omelet that opens when you cut it. You're not just feeding someone, you're performing something. Eldrick walks for a while. I just see what it should look like. I don't plan the performance. I know, Nell says. That's why it works. You can't fake that kind of thing. Planned performance looks like performance. Yours just looks like food that happens to be interesting. She says nothing else on the subject. She doesn't need to. The Imperial Palace is not what Eldrick pictured, which he realizes is partly because he never tried to picture it specifically. And his mind had therefore assembled something generic. Large gates, towers, probably flags. There are large gates and towers and flags. What he didn't account for is the scale, which works on you differently in person than any description prepares you for. The outer wall alone is taller than any building in his city. The courtyard beyond the gate could contain his entire street, food court included, with room for Maddie's brewery and Torrens Forge and probably Brent's house. He stands at the gate with his bag and looks at this for a moment. It's big, Nell says. Yes, I thought you'd say something more. It's very big. The Imperial courier who has accompanied them since the city gate speaks to the gate guard. Papers are examined and then they are not taken to the grand entrance, but directed around to a side road that follows the outer wall and leads, eventually, to a set of lower buildings that service the palace proper, stables, stores, and the kitchen complex. The kitchen yard is where they stop. A young man in a white apron comes out to meet them. He introduces himself as Parson, assistant to the chief palace chef. He has the careful, slightly compressed manner of someone who works in a strict hierarchy and is always conscious of where he stands in it. He runs through the rules efficiently. Do not address His Majesty unless addressed. Do not make eye contact unless His Majesty initiates it. Dishes are to be served in a specific order that he will communicate. The kitchen facilities are available between certain hours and certain areas are restricted. Nell leans close to Eldrick. I thought it would be more interesting, she says very quietly. Same, Eldrick says. Parson hears neither of them or pretends not to. If there are no questions, he says, I'll show you the kitchen. The palace kitchen is enormous. It occupies a long building that runs along the south wall of the service complex, with a high ceiling and windows on both sides and fires burning at stations along both walls. There are 30 or 40 people working in it. Eldrick doesn't count precisely, but the number is large enough that the kitchen has its own weather, its own noise, its own internal rhythms entirely separate from the rhythms of his kitchen. Different bodies, different timing, different calls and responses. He stands inside the door and looks at it. He is not intimidated exactly. He's been in his own kitchen too long for another kitchen to make him feel small. But it's the first time he's been in a space this size doing what his space does. And there is a moment of recalibration. This is what feeding a palace looks like. This is the infrastructure of it. Then he goes to find eggs. The eggs are in a cold storage room off the east end of the kitchen. Good eggs. Large, fresh, the shells slightly rough in the way of eggs that haven't been sitting long. He picks up 3, puts them in his palm, checks the weight. He puts them down and picks up 3 others. Those are better. He does this for a few minutes until Nell comes to find him. What are you doing? Finding the right eggs. They're all, she looks at the shelves. There are hundreds of them. Different weights, different yolk ratios. I want, he holds up 2. These 2 are close. I need 6 like these. Nell looks at both eggs. She looks at him. She picks up an egg from the shelf and holds it. Then another. Then a third. She puts 3 in a row on the shelf. These, she says. He examines them. How did you? I've been working with eggs in your kitchen for 4 years. She picks the 3 up. Let's find your rice. Eldrick is standing at a station near the back of the kitchen, checking whether the small pan he's been assigned heats evenly. It doesn't. Slightly hotter on the left, which means he'll need to compensate when a silence begins at the far end of the kitchen and moves toward him. Not a complete silence. The kitchen keeps working. But there's a quality that changes in the room. A collective awareness. The kind that happens when someone enters who changes the weight of the space. He looks up. Saros is 55 years old and built like a man who has been doing demanding physical work for decades and has not stopped. He is tall, straight-spined, wearing white so clean it seems less like cloth and more like a statement. He walks through the kitchen with the ease of someone who has walked this path 10,000 times and owns every step. And the other cooks give way without being asked. He stops in front of Eldrick. He looks at Eldrick the way you look at an ingredient you've been handed and haven't decided what to do with yet. Evaluating, dispassionate, taking in information without yet producing judgment. You're the fair winner, he says. Yes, from the Western Province. Yes, a pause. What are you preparing? Amuris, Eldrick says. Saros waits. The word has clearly not registered. An omelet, Eldrick says. Over fried rice with sauce. The omelet is cut at the table. It opens and the rice comes through. Saros is quiet for a moment. The kitchen around them has not stopped, but it has the particular quality of continuing while also paying attention. Eggs and rice, Saros says. Yes, you're going to feed the emperor eggs and rice. Yes, Saros looks at him for one more second. He says nothing further. He turns and walks back the way he came, and the quality in the kitchen shifts back to what it was before he arrived. Not because his presence is gone exactly, but because his attention has moved on and taken the weight with it. Nell is at Eldrick's shoulder. He doesn't look pleased, she says. No, Eldrick agrees. Is that a problem? Eldrick looks back at his pan, tests the heat on the left side, still slightly hot. He'll work around it. Ask me tomorrow, he says, and picks up his eggs. The rice is the part he knows. He starts there on the morning of the day, because beginning with something familiar is how you get the rest of the work to settle. The palace kitchen gives him a station at the far end. Not a bad station. Well equipped, though the left side of his assigned pan still runs hotter than the right, and he's placed a folded cloth beneath the left handle to remind himself to compensate. Good rice fried right has a specific sound. It's dry enough that it moves in the pan without sticking, each grain separate, not clumping, not turning to paste. He fries it with diced chicken and 2 kinds of vegetables, adds the sauce he's built from the palace's tomatoes, cooked down, seasoned, a balance of acid and sweetness that sits under everything without announcing itself. The rice takes the sauce color, goes faintly orange-red, and the smell changes from plain grain to something richer and complex. He portions it, shapes it gently on the plate into an oval mound, not decorative, functional, the shape that the omelet will cover and that will come through the cut correctly. Then he turns to the omelet. He has been thinking about the omelet for 4 days. He has been thinking about one specific quality, the moment of the cut. In the vision, the egg fell open like something that had been holding its breath, slow, yielding, the rice flowing through without being pushed. For that to happen, the omelet cannot be merely thin. It has to be thin and barely set, the interior still slightly liquid, which means the exterior has to be just set enough to hold its shape during the 30 seconds between pan and plate before the cut. That window is not large. First attempt. He heats the pan, adds the beaten egg, 3 whole eggs, which he's decided after testing gives the right thickness over the rice mound, and begins the motion. The circular pan shake, keeping the egg moving toward the edges. The way he saw it in the vision, the omelet starts to set from the bottom. He takes it off heat, slides it over the rice. He cuts it, it tears, the set part holds, but the softer center rips rather than opens, a ragged split rather than the clean unfold of the vision. The rice comes through, but not slowly, not the way he wants. Nell removes the plate, brings the pan back, does not comment. Second attempt, same motion, slightly less time on the heat. The omelet comes off too soft when he tries to slide it over the rice. It folds on itself, bunches at one side, won't lie flat. Tears when he cuts it. Nell removes the plate. Third attempt, he adjusts the amount of egg, 2.5, which means cracking 3 and removing some of the third. He changes the pan motion slightly, smaller circles more frequent. The omelet seems right when he slides it. It lies over the rice in a dome he cuts. It tears again. A different kind of tear, the edges hold, but a section in the middle doesn't. Nell is watching. She has been watching all 3 attempts with the attentive patience of someone who is identifying the variable. The temperature of the pan when you start, she says. It's different each time. The first time the pan was hotter, the third time it had cooled down while you adjusted the eggs. Eldrick looks at the pan. Consistent starting temperature. Every attempt, same heat. Then you'll know what you're working with. Fourth attempt. He heats the pan to a specific point. He judges it by holding his hand above the surface. Feeling the heat push back, counting. The same count every time. Adds the egg, the motion. Watches the edge. Takes it off heat at the moment the bottom has set and the top is still translucent, still moving slightly if he tilts the pan. Slides it. The omelet drapes over the rice in a smooth, continuous dome. Cuts it, the omelet opens slowly. The 2 halves fold back, and the rice pushes through the cut in a steady, unhurried flow, warm and orange and dense, spilling across the plate, and the pale egg lies open on either side like the cover of a book. Nell looks at it. There, she says. Eldrick looks at the plate, the sauce goes over the top, the dark, glossy line of it following the shape of the egg. The smell is butter and tomato and egg. 3 things that work together in a way that is straightforward but not simple. Again, he says, I need to do it twice more the same way. He does it twice more. Both times it works. On the second one, the fold is cleaner than the first. On the third, the sauce line is more even. He is satisfied not because they are perfect, but because they are repeatable, which is the only kind of quality that matters when you have one chance. Parson comes to take him to the Emperor at the 2nd hour of the afternoon. The dining room is nothing like Eldrick expected, though he realizes he didn't know what to expect. Small, not a grand hall, a personal room. A table that seats six used by one. High windows, afternoon light, tapestries on the walls that probably mean something to someone, and to Eldrick mean only that the room is old and has been looked after. The Emperor is already seated. The first thing Eldrick notices is not the robes or the crown or any of the formal signifiers. The first thing he notices is the same thing Nell noticed on the road 3 days ago when Eldrick was describing the omelet, and she redirected him. The man at the table is tired in a way that doesn't come from a single bad night. It's a longer tiredness, the kind that comes from months or years of something not being quite right. His posture is careful, not the carefulness of formality, but the carefulness of someone who has learned that sitting a certain way hurts less. Eldrick brings the plate to the table. He sets it in front of the Emperor. The omelet dome pale and smooths. He takes the knife small precise, the one he's been using all morning, and makes the cut directly at the table, directly in front of the Emperor as he planned it. The omelet opens. The rice flows through. The sauce goes on in a single steady line. The Emperor looks at the plate. He looks at it for a while, not confused, not displeased, simply looking the way you look when you've been given something you haven't seen before and you're letting yourself see it before you move. Then he picks up the spoon. Eldrick steps back and does not move and does not look at anything in the room except the table, at a point slightly to the left of the Emperor, which is not eye contact and is not looking away. The Emperor eats, the room has no other sound. Parson is near the door, Nell is in the kitchen. It is only the Emperor and the plate and the sound of a spoon against porcelain. When the plate is 3/4 empty, the Emperor puts the spoon down. Not because he's done, he hasn't moved to put the spoon away, just set it down. He looks at Eldrick. "Where are you from?" he says. "Grand, Your Majesty, a small city to the west." The Emperor looks at the plate, then back at Eldrick. "Why is there no weight, Your Majesty?" "After I eat," the Emperor says slowly, as if articulating something he hasn't tried to articulate before. "There is usually a weight here." He touches the center of his chest below the sternum. "It has been there for a long time." "I assumed that was what eating felt like." Eldrick says nothing. He waits. "There is no weight," the Emperor says. "It's a light dish, Your Majesty." Sarah says light means poor thin. "Not enough." Eldrick is quiet for one moment. He is aware that what he says next is either very stupid or the only honest thing to say, and that in this room, the difference between those two things might not matter. "Saros is wrong," he says. The silence is complete for 3 full seconds. Then the Emperor looks at the plate, at the rice still there, at the folded egg, at the sauce. He picks up the spoon. "Bring another," he says. Parson tells Saros. Eldrick doesn't know this directly. What he knows is that 20 minutes after the second plate goes to the Emperor's table, Saros appears in the kitchen. He doesn't rush. He walks with the same measured pace as always, the pace of a man who does not consider hurrying to be an appropriate response to anything. He comes to Eldrick's station and stands. Eldrick is cleaning the pan. He keeps cleaning the pan. "Interesting," Saros says. It is not the word of a man who is interested. It is the word of a man who has decided that interesting is the correct register for what he wants to communicate. Contained, neutral, giving nothing away. "You leave tomorrow," Saros says. "We're scheduled to leave the day after." "I said tomorrow." Eldrick puts the pan down. He turns and looks at Saros directly, which in this kitchen means looking at a man who has been the authority in this room for 25 years and does not expect to be looked at as an equal. "The schedule is from the imperial household," Eldrick says, "not from the kitchen." Saros holds his gaze. There is something in his face that is not anger. Anger would be easier to read. It is something more settled than anger. The expression of a man who has identified a situation and is already deciding what to do about it. "Tomorrow," he says. He says it as though the prior exchange didn't happen, as though Eldrick's response was a technical error that doesn't need addressing because it won't matter. Then he turns and walks back across the kitchen, and the staff give way before him as they always do, and the kitchen returns to its regular noise. Nell is at Eldrick's shoulder. She waited until Saros was at the far end of the room before appearing, which was its own kind of statement about the situation. "He doesn't look pleased," she says. "No, is this going to be a prob?" Eldrick picks the pan back up, finishes cleaning it, sets it on the rack. "The Emperor asked for a second plate," he says. "Yes, and the last cook who made that happen was probably Soros." Nell says a long time ago. Eldrick dries his hands. He looks at the kitchen, at the dozens of people working in it, all of them subject to the hierarchy that Soros has spent 25 years constructing, maintaining, defending. "Ask me again when we're home," he says. The guest quarters are at the end of a long corridor that smells of old stone and expensive candles. 2 rooms adjoining with a door between them that neither Eldrick nor Nell bothers to close, because there's no reason to. The rooms are nicer than any room either of them has slept in, which neither of them comments on. Nell hangs her knives on the hook beside the window. Eldrick puts his bag on the chair and sits on the edge of the bed and thinks about the day. The Emperor asked for a second plate. He is thinking about this not as a victory but as a fact, a data point. Like the way the pan heated unevenly, or the way the caramel needed exactly 30 seconds at amber color. The Emperor asked for a second plate. That means something. But he hasn't decided yet what it means for tomorrow, for the day after, for the letter that said come to the palace and the life that is waiting back in a city 3 days west. You noticed, Nell says from the other room. He looks through the open doorway. She's at the window looking out at the palace courtyard, which is still active even at this hour. Guards, servants, the permanent low industry of a place that doesn't sleep. Noticed what he says. The Emperor, she doesn't turn around. What he looks like. He looked tired. Not tired. She turns then and she has the expression she gets when she's about to say something she's been holding on to. Something that needed time to form completely before being spoken. He looks like someone who has been fed badly for years. The color in his face. It's off. It's the color of someone whose liver is working too hard. The way he sits carefully at the table. That's not ceremony. That's discomfort he's learned to manage. His hands. She pauses. People who eat too much fat and too little fresh food. Their joints go stiff. His hands move carefully. Eldrick looks at the wall. You were with the herb woman for 3 years. 3 years is enough to see some things. Nell comes and sits in the chair on her side of the doorway. I'm not saying I know what's wrong with him. I'm saying I've seen that look before. On farmers, wives who ate the same heavy stew every day of their lives and nothing else. And I know what it tends to mean. Eldrick is quiet. It's not our business, he says. No, Nell says it isn't. They both sit with that for a moment. The candle on the table between them burns steadily. Outside, a guard crosses the courtyard. We leave the day after tomorrow, Eldrick says. Yes, Nell says. Neither of them says anything else. They don't need to. The conversation has arrived at its actual point, not the Emperor's health, not the question of whose business it is, but the fact that they both know what they know and will carry it home with them regardless, and that sometimes knowing something is a weight whether or not you choose to act on it. The doctor comes the next morning. He finds Eldrick in the kitchen at the early hour, when the palace staff is setting up for the day's first preparations, and the light through the high windows is still pale. He's young, late 20s, with a slightly compressed expression of someone navigating a hierarchy they didn't design and are not entirely comfortable in. He comes to Eldrick's station with the specific manner of someone who has something to say, and has been calculating for some time whether saying it is wise. The Emperor asked for a second plate, he says quietly. Checking first that the nearest staff are occupied. I know Eldrick says I was there. He hasn't done that in 6 months with anything. The doctor looks at the counter, not at Eldrick. We've been trying to understand. The physicians have been trying to understand why he's been declining. He eats. He sleeps. He does everything that should produce health, and it produces the opposite. A pause. What did you put in the dish? Eggs, rice, chicken, tomato sauce, butter, nothing else, salt, some pepper. The doctor is quiet. That's almost nothing, he says. Not a criticism, a kind of wonder. What does he normally eat, Eldrick asks. What the doctor describes takes several minutes. It is in its way an impressive edifice, a structure of food that has been built over decades, course by course, by a man who considers richness to be the highest virtue of a dish. Roasted meats in their own fat, reduced sauces built from cream and butter and stock cooked down to intensity, sweets between every course, wine with everything. Vegetables when they appear drowned in fat or sugar or both. No acid, no fresh things, no lightness anywhere. Eldrick listens. He listens the way he listens to Maddie's talk about water hardness, with the specific attention of someone learning something they didn't know they needed. Whose menu is that? He says, it is the imperial menu. The doctor says carefully, it has been the imperial menu for. Whose idea was it? A pause that is itself an answer. Chef Saros has overseen imperial dining for 25 years. The doctor says in the tone of a man reading from a record he didn't write. Eldrick wipes the counter. He does this sometimes when he's thinking. A motion that costs nothing and keeps his hands honest. Always the same menu, he says, with variations, seasonal adjustments. But the doctor chooses the word. Philosophy has been consistent. And the Emperor has been declining for 2 years. The doctor says nothing. He doesn't need to. Eldrick puts the cloth down. I don't know anything about medicine, he says. I know about food. And I know that if you feed someone the same heavy things every day for 25 years and they feel worse every year, the food is something to look at. Saros believes. I know what Saros believes. Eldrick turns to look at the doctor. I told the Emperor that directly. Saros believes light food is poor food. He's wrong, not about everything but about this. The doctor looks at him with an expression that is somewhere between relief and fear. The expression of someone who has been thinking the same thing for a long time and has not allowed himself to say it, and is now hearing it said by someone who appears unafraid of the consequences. I would be grateful, the doctor says very quietly, for any thoughts you might be willing to share about food, about what the body needs. He reaches into his coat and puts a small card on the counter, an address, Imperial Physician's Offices. In writing, if that's easier, if you have time, he leaves before Eldrick can respond. The search happens that afternoon. Nell finds it, or rather, she notices it, because the search has been done carefully by someone who knows how to look through things and replace them in approximately the right position. Approximately, not exactly. Someone went through our bags, she says. Eldrick looks at his bag. The cloth is folded differently than he left it. His spare clothes are stacked in a slightly different order. The jar of marinade Nell brought is on the left side of her bag rather than the right. The kitchen too, Nell says. The station we used, the ingredients we brought. Eldrick looks at the kitchen. The flour he brought for the omelet test batches is open. He sealed it. The spice packets are in a different order. They were looking for the recipe, he says. Nell shakes her head. The recipe for what? For an omelet. You crack eggs and move a pan. That's not a secret. She looks at the open flour. They were looking for something else. Something they expected to find. Eldrick thinks about this. About what someone would expect to find in a cook's bag who came from outside. Who fed the Emperor something that made him feel better when Saros's food has been making him feel worse. What would you look for if you were trying to explain away the outcome? What would you hope to find that would give you a story to tell? An adulterant, he says, something added to the food. Nell looks at him. They wanted to find something suspicious so they could say. The improvement wasn't from the dish. It was from something put in the dish. He looks at the flour. Something that shouldn't be there. They both stand with that for a moment. There's nothing to find, Nell says, I know. So they didn't find anything. No, he closes the flour sack, but they looked. That's enough to tell me what kind of problem this is. They leave the next morning, which is the scheduled day and not the day Saros specified, because Eldrick read the official letter again after the search and found that the Imperial household schedule was clearly written and did not require Saros' endorsement. He showed this to Parson. Parson, who operates in the hierarchy and knows whose authority belongs to whom, agreed with the slightly pained expression of a man caught between two competing powers that both have legitimate claims. They ride out at dawns. By the second day, the city is behind them, and the road west has the wide, unhurried quality of a route that leads somewhere worth going. Nell rides without talking much. Eldrick thinks about eggs and about emperors, and about the peculiar way that his life has arranged itself since the night with the flour and the floor and the men in metal-plated boots. He is a cook from a small city. He has always been a cook from a small city. He made one dish because a vision showed it to him, and then another, and then several more. And now he is 3 days from a palace, where the emperor ate his food twice, and an imperial physician has given him a card with an address on it. A courier on horseback catches them at the midday stop. The letter is brief. The physician's handwriting tight, careful. The handwriting of a man who writes precisely because he has to. He would be grateful for any thoughts on the subject of diet and its relationship to the body's functioning. He has questions. He is aware that this is an unusual request. He would understand if the reply never comes. Nell reads it over Eldrick's shoulder. You understand what this is. She's a physician asking questions. A physician in a palace asking a cook questions about the food that's making the emperor sick, while the man responsible for that food has just searched our bags. She folds her horse's reins. This is palace politics, Eldrick. This is the kind of thing people get lost in. I'm a cook. Exactly, she says. That is exactly why. She looks at the letter in his hands. Saros has power through the kitchen, through what the emperor eats, who prepares it, who has access to that access. You walked into his kitchen, made something in one day that he hasn't made in years, and the emperor asked for more. She's quiet for a moment. You didn't challenge him, you just cooked, and that was worse. Eldrick looks at the letter. The address in the palace physician's offices, the road goes west. 3 days to home, to the outdoor tables and the ramen and Mattis's beer and Bren at the end of the long bench with his opinions about everything. 3 days back to the life that assembled itself, the life he made without planning it, the one that feels like his. He folds the letter and puts it in his coat. I'll write back, he says. Nell says nothing. She knew he would. The food court smells right. That's the first thing Eldrick registers when they come through the gate on the evening of the 6th day. The specific layered smell of the place, broth and hops, and the faint sweetness of the taiyaki mold still warm from the day. And underneath it the cold stone of the street and the particular quality of air that belongs to this city and no other. He stops at the gate for a moment. Nell walks past him without stopping, already oriented toward the kitchen. Tess is at the front counter. She looks at them with the expression of a person who has been managing something complicated in someone else's absence, and is now performing the specific relief of handing it back, not showing the difficulty, showing the resolution. This is a distinction Eldrick has come to recognize about Tess. She doesn't report problems, she reports outcomes. New batch from the brewery, she says. Matt has started it without telling anyone. It's a light one, he says it's for summer, which means we'll have too much of it in autumn, but he made it anyway. She picks up a second piece of paper. Torin made 3 more taiyaki molds without being asked. He invoiced us. The price is not small. She puts down the paper. And the man from Varin came again. Third time he waited 2 hours and left a letter. What does the letter say? Nell calls from the kitchen. That the burgomaster is a patient man but has a council, and the council is less patient. Nell makes a sound from behind the kitchen wall that might be a response, or might be a comment on the state of the broth. Eldrick walks through the dining room to the kitchen door and stops there. Nell is already at the fire, lifting the lid of the broth pot, checking it with the spoon the way she does, tasting, considering, adjusting. The kitchen is exactly as he left it. The familiar disorder that isn't disorder, everything in the place it ended up, which is the place that made sense at the time, which means everything is findable if you know the logic. His station, his pan on the rack. The folded cloth he uses for the pan handle. He stands there for a while in the doorway, not going in yet. The broth is fine, Nell says without turning around. Go sit down. You've been traveling for 3 days. I'm not tired. I know. Go sit down anyway. He goes and sits down. He doesn't know who told first. Someone at the palace, a servant, a guard. Someone in the courier office who handled the original invitation letter. The information moves the way information moves, when it's interesting, through every channel simultaneously, faster than anyone plans. By the end of the week after their return, the whole city knows that Eldrick went to the imperial palace and cooked for the emperor, and the emperor asked for a second plate. The food court queue gets longer. Not dramatically, not overnight, but measurably more people. Different kinds of people, people who have come specifically and from further away. The nature of the thing has shifted slightly. Before it was, you should go to that food court. It's good. Now it's, you should go to that food court. It's what the emperor eats. These are the same recommendation. They have completely different weights. Bren processes this development with great satisfaction. He has begun prefacing his description of the ramen to new arrivals with, I was the first person to eat this. Before the emperor, before any of it, he says this, with the casual authority of a man stating a historical fact, which it is, technically, he never says he knew it would become what it became. He implies it. Eldrick overhears this on a Tuesday morning and says nothing. There's no version of this conversation that ends well. The correspondence with the palace physician starts small. Eldrick writes a single page about balance, about the logic of a meal that doesn't tax what it feeds, about the way his mother's kitchen worked when he was young, before he was a cook and food was simply food. He writes it the way he talks, which is plainly without ceremony. He sends it. The physician writes back within the week. Longer than Eldrick's letter, more formal, but with specific questions embedded in the formality. What does Eldrick use instead of heavy reduction sauces? How does he think about acid in a dish? What does he make for someone who needs to eat but cannot eat much? Eldrick writes back. He includes a recipe for a simple broth, not ramen, something lighter, chicken bones and ginger and a little vinegar. 3 days of this and you'll see a difference in how someone feels, he writes. Not because it cures anything, because it stops making things worse. The physician writes again. The emperor is sleeping better. Nell reads the letters over his shoulder because she does not pretend not to be interested. You're changing what they feed him, she says. Through letters, I'm answering questions about food. Through letters to a palace physician who is applying the answers to the emperor's diet. She waits. Saros is going to find out. Probably. That's dangerous. Eldrick is writing the address on the next reply. He puts the pen down, goes to the kitchen, comes back with a plate. Amarisi makes it sometimes now for himself or for Nell, because the technique requires practice and he doesn't want to lose it. He puts the plate in front of her. Eat, he says. Nell looks at the plate. Looks at him. That's not an answer. No, he says. But it's dinner. She eats it. Maddie's fourth beer is light gold, almost transparent, with a smell like bread and summer grain. He brings a cup to the counter one evening and sets it in front of Tess without comment. Tess drinks it. Her eyebrows go up. This is different. Less malt. Different hop timing. Maddie's takes the cup back. Looks at the color in the evening light. It's light easy, not for serious drinkers. Maddie's test says most of our customers in the evening are not serious drinkers. They're people who worked all day and want to sit outside with something cold. Then it will sell well, Maddie says, in the tone of a man making a prediction he finds mildly disappointing. It sells very well. By the second week, Maddie's has to start a new batch mid-cycle to keep up with the demand, which requires rearranging the brewery schedule, which he does without complaining, but with an expression that communicates volumes about his views on popularity. Torin eats at the food court 4 evenings out of 7 now. He always takes the same table, second from the left in the outdoor row, and he always orders the ramen and one of whatever new thing is on the board. And he always waits slightly too long because the table fills up quickly, and Tess prioritizes paying customers over craftsmen who show up hoping for courtesy bowls. He waits without complaining, which is its own kind of compliment. You could come earlier, Nell tells him one evening. I close the forge at 6, Torin says. We open at 4. I have things to do between 6 and when I arrive. What things? A pause. I walk, he says finally. I walk around for a while before I come. He picks up his ramen. Don't make a thing of it. Nell makes no thing of it. She goes back to the kitchen. But later she tells Eldrick. And Eldrick thinks about the large, quiet man who walks around the city for an hour after work. So he arrives at the food court at a specific time that feels to him like the right time to arrive. And something about this sits with Eldrick in a way he can't quite name. Bren, when told about it, says he's not walking to walk, he's walking so he arrives hungry. He thinks about it. Smart man. The letter from the Imperial Kitchen Administration arrives on a Thursday, comes in a formal envelope, sealed with a seal that Eldrick doesn't recognize. Not the Imperial bird. A different mark. An administrative seal. The language inside is smooth and careful. The language of bureaucracy that has been polished until it has no edges. The substance establishments operating without imperial food license may not use any reference to the imperial household in advertising or promotion by implication or direct statement. Tess reads it first. We haven't said anything about the emperor. Not in any sign. Not at the counters. Not anywhere. I know, Nell says. She takes the letter and reads it again. It's not about what we said. It's about what people are saying for us. Everyone knows. Zeros can't stop that. But he can make a formal record. He can establish that he tried. Why does he need a record? Nell looks at the seal. Because a record is a foundation, you build the next thing on the thing before. She puts the letter on the counter. This letter doesn't do anything to us today. It sets up the next letter. Eldrick takes it. He looks at the seal, the administrative mark, not the imperial one. Saros has authority over the kitchen. He doesn't have imperial authority. He can't send letters from the emperor. He can send letters from his own office, and this is what those letters look like. He doesn't like that the emperor is feeling better. Nell says quietly, not to either of them specifically. Just saying it. The letter goes into the wooden box where Eldrick keeps things that might matter later. He doesn't respond to it. There's nothing in it that requires a response. Evening. The food court is full and the wait is full on good evenings. Not crowded, occupied, every table in use, and the outdoor row running the whole length of the rebuilt wall, and the kitchen sending out a steady flow that Nell manages with the efficiency of a person who has done this so many times that the work is partly automatic. From inside the kitchen doorway you can see the whole street, the tables, the people, the light from the taiyaki station catching the steam from the ramen pots, the brewery window with its warm yellow square where Maddie's is working on something late, 3 musicians at the far end of the street. Bren found them 2 with strings and 1 with a small horn, and they play in the evenings from the 7th bell onward. And what they play is not elaborate or particularly skilled, but it fills the space in the right way, the way that music fills a space when it belongs to the place and not to itself. Children with taiyaki. Men and women with beer and ramen. The 2 old men who play dice here every Thursday, regardless of weather. A family from 2 cities east. The mother pointing at the onigiri board and explaining something to her children who are already pointing at the taiyaki molds. Eldrick stands in the kitchen doorway. 1 year ago on a night not unlike this one, there were 5 tables and 3 candles, and a menu that hadn't changed in 7 years. There was flour on the floor and 4 men in metal boots and 3 days of unconsciousness, and then a bowl he'd never seen from somewhere he couldn't name that his hands already knew how to make. He is thinking about this without quite thinking about it, the way you think about a thing that is too large to look at directly. Bren materializes beside him. This is one of Bren's skills, appearing without announcement, as though he simply condensed out of the general situation. He has a cup of the light beer and the particular settled expression of a man who is exactly where he wants to be. They stand together in the doorway and look at the street. What comes next, Bren says eventually. I don't know. Eldrick looks at the taiyaki station, the onigiri counter, the ramen pot. The visions haven't come for 3 weeks. Resting, Bren says, or waiting for something. Bren drinks his beer. Same thing, different names. Tess comes out of the side entrance with a letter. She has the expression she uses when she's managing news, not hiding it, holding it at a careful angle until the right moment. Second letter this week, Eldrick says, different kind. She looks at the envelope, at the seal, imperial red, the bird pressed deep in the wax, not the administrative mark, the real one. It's not from the physician. Everyone who is close enough to hear has, in the particular way of groups of people when something important happens, stopped doing whatever they were doing without quite deciding to. Nell is at the kitchen window. Read it, she says. Tess breaks the seal. She reads it again, which means it's not simple. Then she looks up. You're invited to take a permanent position, she says. Personal cook to His Imperial Majesty. The street goes on being the street. The musicians play. The 2 old men roll dice. A child bites the tail off a taiyaki, and the crack is just barely audible. Nobody at the tables within earshot says anything. They have all, without meaning to, heard. They are in the specific stillness of people waiting to hear what happens next. Bren, is that good news? Eldrick looks at his kitchen. At Nell in the window, who is looking at him with the expression she uses when she's already thought through something and is waiting for him to catch up. At Torin at his second from left table, studying the label on his beer cup, with the concentration of someone who is absolutely not listening. At Maddie's brewery window, yellow and steady, where Maddie's knows nothing yet and is the better for it. At the tables, the people, the smell of the place that hit him right when he came through the gate 6 days ago and meant home. It's complicated news, he says. That night after closing, after the musicians pack up and the last guests go and the kitchen fire is low, Eldrick sits at the counter alone. He thinks about 2 things at once. The first, Saros, the kitchen at the palace, the hierarchy of 25 years, the search bags, the administrative letter, the cold evaluating look of a man deciding what to do about a problem. If he refuses the position, the physician's letters will stop. Saros will see to that. The Emperor's food will go back to what it was. The improvement will reverse slowly, and Eldrick will never know how far it goes. The second, the food court, the outdoor tables, Brennel, Tess and Torin and Maddie's, and the light beer that sells too well, and the children who hold the taiyaki up to look at the light before they eat it. He cannot have both. He understands this now on this side of the letter. The palace doesn't ask for part of you. He is still sitting there when the vision comes, not in sleep in the space between thinking and not thinking. The thin territory the visions have always found. He doesn't go somewhere else. He just sees superimposed over the kitchen, over the familiar counter, and the pots and the pan on the rack a hall. Larger than the palace dining room. Larger than anything he's cooked in. Full of people, more than he can count from where he's standing, seated at long tables or standing at the edges, serving stations, food moving, the smell, complex, layered, things he knows and things he doesn't. Things he hasn't made yet and can't name, only the general shape of them, the sense of what they might be. Then it's gone. He sits with the counter under his hands. He looks at the kitchen, at the pan, at the folded cloth on the pan handle. Ciros is waiting for him to make an error, to refuse and look ungrateful, to accept and look naive, to arrive at the palace kitchen and be paralyzed by the scale of it, by the hierarchy, by 25 years of someone else's rules embedded in every procedure. The visions have never come without reason. They have never shown him something he couldn't make. They have never shown him something that wasn't worth making. He takes the imperial letter out of his coat and sets it on the counter in front of him, reads it one more time. The seal, the formal language, the appointed date. He picks up his pen. He begins to write.